What do you do when the man destined by fate to be your everything looks you in the eyes and calls you worthless? When he tears apart the sacred bond the moon itself forged between your souls? I'm about to tell you the story of a woman who was publicly destroyed by the one person who should have protected her, and how she rose from those ashes to become the most dangerous force the wolf kingdoms had ever seen. This isn't your typical rejected mate story. This is war. This is power. This is survival. Stay with me until the end, and don't forget to hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know where my pack is watching from tonight. The ceremonial hall stretched 300 feet from end to end, carved from black mountain stone that had stood for 1,000 years. Tonight it held every ranked wolf from the Northern Territories, alphas in their formal leathers, betas with ceremonial blades at their hips, high-ranking families in silks that cost more than most wolves earned in a year. 5,000 wolves packed shoulder to shoulder, and every single one of them had come to watch Celine Ashford become their Luna. She stood at the entrance in a white gown that felt like a burial shroud, hands trembling so badly she had to lock her fingers together to hide it. The fabric was simple, no beading, no embroidery, because she'd been told not to outshine the Alpha King. Even now, even at her own mating ceremony, she was supposed to be less. The Luna mark on her left shoulder blade burned like someone had pressed a brand into her skin. It had appeared 3 months ago on her 18th birthday, the ancient wolf rune that marked a true Luna, not one chosen by politics or convenience, but selected by the moon bloodline itself. The mark that couldn't be faked or forged. The mark that meant the wolf gods themselves had chosen her for Kyle Stormborn, Alpha King of the Northern Empire. Her wolf paced inside her mind, anxious and aggressive. Something is wrong. Celine pushed the thought down. Everything was wrong. Everything had been wrong since the moment the mark appeared and the Moon Council had arrived at her father's small border pack to inform her that her entire life had just been ripped away and reassigned. She wasn't Celine the teacher's daughter anymore. She was Celine the Luna designate. She was property of the crown. The ceremonial drums started, deep and resonant, shaking dust from the ancient rafters. "Walk," her wolf urged. "Get it over with." She walked. The aisle seemed endless. Faces turned toward her, some curious, most dismissive. She caught whispers that weren't quite whispers, words meant to carry. "That's her?" She looked small. Border pack blood. What was the Moon Council thinking? I heard she's never even trained. How's she supposed to stand beside an Alpha King? Celine kept her chin up and her eyes forward. She'd been trained for this moment by the Council's advisors for 3 months straight. How to walk, how to hold her hands, how to bow at precisely the right angle. They'd criticized everything about her, her posture, her voice, the way she breathed too loudly when she was nervous. They'd made it clear that she was an embarrassment, a cosmic mistake, a weak link that had to be polished into something barely acceptable. But none of that mattered now. Because at the end of the aisle, standing on the raised platform beneath the massive carved moon symbol, was Kale Stormborn. 6'4" of pure predator wrapped in black leather and silver ceremonial armor. Dark hair pulled back from a face that could have been carved from the same mountain stone as the hall. Sharp jaw, brutal cheekbones, eyes so pale blue they looked almost white in the torchlight. He was 30 years old and he'd been Alpha King for 8 of them, ever since he'd challenged his own father and torn out the old king's throat in front of the entire court. The Northern Empire had tripled in size under his rule. 12 packs bowed to him now. 12 alphas called him king, and he was looking at Celine like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. Her wolf whimpered. "Mate, that's our mate." The bond pulled at her chest, that invisible thread that connected their souls. She'd felt it the moment she'd first met him 3 months ago. The overwhelming rush of recognition, the certainty that this male was hers, and she was his, and nothing else in the world mattered. She'd looked into those cold eyes and felt her entire being reach for him. He'd looked at her and felt nothing. She reached the platform. The drums stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Kyle didn't offer his hand to help her up the 3 steps. She climbed them alone, her white dress whispering against stone, and took her place beside him. He didn't look at her. His attention was fixed on the crowd, on his empire, on everything except the female the moon itself had chosen for him. Elder Thorn stepped forward, the head of the Moon Council, ancient and withered and absolutely merciless. He'd been the one to inform Celine that her wants didn't matter, her feelings didn't matter, her entire life didn't matter. The Luna Mark had spoken. She belonged to Kael now. "The ceremony will now begin," Thorn announced, his voice magically amplified to fill every corner of the massive hall. "We gather under the eyes of the moon bloodline to witness the sacred bonding of Alpha and Luna, king and queen, warrior and heart." Celine's hands were shaking again. She forced them still. "Alpha King Kael Stormborn," Thorn continued, "you stand before your empire and before the ancient powers that shaped our kind. Do you accept this female as your destined mate, your Luna, your equal in all things?" The silence stretched. Kael turned his head and looked at Celine for the first time since she'd entered the hall. His pale eyes traveled over her face with the cold assessment of someone evaluating livestock. She felt the bond strain between them, desperate and yearning, trying to pull them together. His lip curled in disgust. "No," he said. His voice cut through the hall like a blade. "I reject this bond." The world stopped. Celine's wolf howled in anguish, a sound that tore through her mind like claws. The bond between them seized, pulled tight, began to shred. Pain exploded across her chest, white-hot and blinding. She staggered, caught herself, pressed her hand to her heart. The hall erupted in chaos. Shocked voices, gasps, wolves surging to their feet. Elder Thorn's face went sheet white. Kael continued as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the center of his own kingdom. "I reject Celine Ashford as my Luna. I reject the bond between us. I reject the Moon Council's choice." The pain in Celine's chest intensified, feeling like her soul was being ripped in half. The Luna mark on her shoulder blade burned hotter, brighter, fighting against the rejection. Mate bonds couldn't be rejected. That was the law written into their very genetics. When the moon chose, wolves obeyed. But Kael Stormborn had just spit in the face of fate itself. "You cannot," Elder Thorn stammered, his composure shattered. "The mark has appeared. The bond has formed. This is sacred law." "I am the law," Kael said softly, dangerously. His attention hadn't left Celine's face. "Look at her. Border pack, no training, no bloodline, no strength. The Moon Council expects me to bind my kingdom to this?" Celine couldn't speak, couldn't move. The bond was dying, tearing itself apart, and it felt like dying with it. She'd never wanted this, never wanted to be Luna, never wanted to leave her home, never wanted to be shackled to a male who looked at her like she was nothing. But the bond didn't care about want. The bond just was, and now it was being destroyed, and her body didn't know the difference between rejection and death. "She's weak," Kael continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "She's untrained. She's a liability. I've built this empire with blood and strength, and I won't see it crumble because the Moon bloodline made a mistake." "The mark," Thorn tried again, desperate now. "The mark cannot be forged. She is your true Luna." "Then the Moon bloodline is flawed," Kael said flatly. He turned to face the crowd, dismissing Celine entirely. "My empire needs a Luna who can fight beside me, a queen who can lead warriors, a mate whose bloodline brings strength and alliances." He gestured toward Celine without looking at her. "This female brings nothing." Celine's vision swam. Her wolf was screaming, thrashing, tearing at her from the inside. The pain spread from her chest down her arms, up her throat, a living thing trying to consume her. She swayed on her feet. No one moved to catch her. "I reject Celine Ashford," Kael repeated, the formal words of severance that should have been impossible to speak. "I sever the bond between us. I deny the mark. I cast her from my territory and my empire." Something inside Celine's chest snapped. The pain vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold so absolute it felt like she'd been plunged into ice water. The bond between them went dead. Not shredded anymore. Just gone. Empty. A void where something sacred had existed. The Luna mark on her shoulder blade flared one more time, brilliant and burning, then went quiet. Elder Thorn looked like he might collapse. The crowd had gone completely silent, 5,000 wolves holding their breath. No one had ever seen this happen before. No one had even thought it was possible. Kael raised his voice to address them all. "Let this be a lesson. Power bows to no one. Not fate, not tradition, not ancient laws written by dead wolves. I am Alpha King of the Northern Empire, and I will not be chained by anyone's choice but my own. His eyes found Celine one last time. Leave my territory, Border Wolf. You have until dawn. If you're still here when the sun rises, my warriors will remove you by force. He turned and walked away. His inner circle followed, Beta Ronin with his scarred face and cold efficiency, Third Commander Darius, who'd always looked at Celine like she was prey, a dozen high-ranking wolves who'd made it clear from day one that she wasn't wanted here. The platform emptied around her. Celine stood alone in her white dress in front of 5,000 witnesses, and not one of them met her eyes. The shame was suffocating. The humiliation pressed down on her shoulders like physical weight. She'd been rejected, publicly destroyed, cast out like garbage. Her wolf was silent now, withdrawn so deep inside her mind that Celine couldn't feel her anymore. Someone in the crowd laughed. The sound broke the tension, and then there were more. Not loud, but enough. Enough to make it clear what they thought of her. Enough to make it clear that no one would stand for her. No one would question their Alpha King's choice. Celine's legs moved. She didn't remember telling them to. She walked back down the aisle, past those thousands of faces, and every step felt like walking through her own funeral. The ceremonial hall that should have crowned her queen had become her execution ground. She made it outside before the tears came. Dushchan. The northern territories spread before her in the moonlight, all shadows and silver and predator eyes watching from the darkness between trees. Celine had been given a small room in the outer circle of the pack compound, not even in the main palace, just a converted storage space that made it clear exactly how temporary her presence was supposed to be. She reached it now and found her belongings already packed. 3 months of her life reduced to 2 bags someone else had shoved her clothes into. They hadn't bothered to fold anything. They just wanted her gone. Celine sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at her hands. They'd finally stopped shaking. Everything had stopped. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean, empty. Her wolf stirred. We need to run. Where? Celine thought back. We have nowhere. Away from here. Away from him. North. North was forbidden territory. North was the wild lands where rogues and ferals and things worse than either one hunted in packs. North was where wolves went to die. Her wolf showed teeth. Then we'll die free. A knock on the door made them both freeze. Celine's first instinct was fear, that Kyle had sent warriors to remove her early, that she had minutes instead of hours. But the knock came again, soft and almost apologetic. She opened the door to find a female wolf around her age, dark-skinned and nervous, wearing the simple clothes of a pack servant. I brought you food, the female said quietly, holding out a wrapped bundle. For the journey. Celine stared at it. Why? The female's eyes flicked down the hallway like she was afraid of being seen. Because what he did was wrong. The female pressed the bundle into Celine's hands. The mark chose you. That means something, no matter what the Alpha King says. Celine's throat closed. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with kindness instead of contempt. Thank you. My name is Mari. The female hesitated, then added, If you survive out there, if you find somewhere safe, remember that not everyone in this empire agreed with him tonight. She left before Celine could respond, disappearing down the corridor like she'd never been there. Celine unwrapped the bundle. Bread, dried meat, a flask of water. Simple traveling food, but it felt like more than that. It felt like proof that somewhere in this kingdom of 5,000 wolves, at least one of them had seen her as something other than a mistake. Her wolf pushed forward. We leave now. It's not dawn yet. He wants us humiliated, wants us to slink away in the dark like a beaten dog. Her wolf's voice was cold as winter. We don't give him that. We walk out of here with our head up. Celine changed out of the ceremonial dress and into traveling clothes. Dark pants, a fitted shirt, a cloak with a hood. She braided her dark hair back. She strapped a small knife to her belt, the only weapon she owned. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror on the wall and barely recognized the female staring back. 3 months ago, she had been a teacher's assistant in a small border pack, content with her quiet life. Now she was a rejected Luna with a mark that still burned beneath her skin and nowhere in the world to go. The Luna mark. She pulled her shirt aside and looked at it in the mirror, the ancient rune that sat just below her left shoulder, dark against her pale skin. It should have faded when Kyle severed the bond. Rejected marks always faded. But this one looked darker than ever, the lines crisp and black and somehow deeper than before. Her wolf studied it with predator focus. It's not done with us. What does that mean? I don't know. But we're going to find out. Celine shouldered her bags and walked out of the room without looking back. The compound was mostly empty at this hour. The ceremony had run late, and most wolves were either still at the hall drinking and celebrating the fact that they didn't have to bow to a weak Luna, or they'd gone to their own quarters. She moved through shadows and silence, another ghost in a place that had never wanted her. She was almost to the main gates when a voice stopped her cold, leaving without saying goodbye. Border wolf? Celine turned to find Beta Ronin leaning against a pillar, arms crossed over his chest. He was Kael's right hand, the wolf who'd been at the Alpha King's side since they were children, scarred and brutal and absolutely loyal to his king. I have until dawn, Celine said quietly. I'm leaving early. Ronin studied her with dark eyes that gave nothing away. Smart. Kael's in a mood. You don't want to be here when he starts looking for things to break. Then why are you here? Making sure you actually leave. Ronin pushed off the pillar and walked toward her with that predator grace all high-ranking wolves had. The Alpha King doesn't make empty threats. Dawn comes and you're still here. I'll be the one dragging you out. I'd rather not. Celine met his eyes. Does it bother you at all? What he did? What he did was necessary, Ronin said flatly. You're a border wolf with no training and no bloodline. The Empire needs a Luna who can actually lead. The Mark chose me. The Mark was wrong. Ronin's expression didn't change. It happens. Ancient magic doesn't understand modern politics. Kael needs alliances, and you can't give him that. He needs a warrior queen, and you can't be that. He did what was best for his people. Even if it breaks sacred law? There's only one law that matters here, Kael's. Ronin's voice dropped lower. Word of advice, Border Wolf. Wherever you go, whoever takes you in, don't tell them about the Mark. Don't tell them you were chosen and rejected. Wolves talk, and that kind of story makes you either a target or a joke. Celine's jaw tightened. I'll remember that. Good. Ronin stepped aside, clearing her path to the gates. Run far, run fast, and don't ever come back. She walked past him without another word. The main gate stood open, guarded by two warriors who watched her approach with cold disinterest. Neither of them moved to stop her. Neither of them spoke. She was already a ghost to them, already erased from their world. Celine walked through those gates and into the wild lands beyond, and she didn't look back. The forest swallowed her whole. 3 hours of walking took her far from the pack compound, deep into territory that didn't belong to any kingdom. The moon was high and full, turning the world silver in shadow. Her wolf's night vision cut through the darkness easily, picking out paths and dangers and the small prey animals that scattered at their approach. She walked until her legs ached and her feet burned, and then she walked farther. She walked until the shame and humiliation started to fade into something colder, harder. Her wolf had gone quiet, conserving energy, but Celine could feel her there, watchful, waiting, not broken. Just changed. What do we do now? Celine asked silently. Survive, her wolf answered. Learn, get strong, and make sure no one ever looks at us like that again. The sky was starting to lighten when Celine finally stopped. She'd reached a small clearing beside a stream, protected on 3 sides by thick undergrowth. Defensible, hidden, good enough for a few hours of rest. She dropped her bags and knelt by the water, splashing it on her face. The cold shocked her system awake, chasing away the exhaustion that pulled at her bones. She could see her reflection in the water, pale face, dark eyes that looked too old for 18, the set of her jaw that said she'd passed some invisible threshold tonight and couldn't go back. Something moved in the trees. Celine's wolf surged forward and she spun, hand going to the knife at her belt. Her heart hammered. She scanned the darkness, every sense straining. A massive wolf stepped into the clearing. Not massive, absolutely enormous. Easily twice the size of any normal wolf, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed amber in the pre-dawn gloom, fixed on Celine with an intelligence that was distinctly not animal. A rogue alpha. Celine's wolf screamed at her to run, but her body had locked up, every instinct firing at once. Rogue alphas were rare and deadly. Wolves who'd been exiled from their packs and had survived alone long enough that something inside them broke and reformed into something more feral, more dangerous. They were territorial, aggressive, and they didn't hesitate to kill. The wolf took another step forward. Celine's hand tightened on her knife, knowing it would be useless but unable to let go. The wolf's lips pulled back, showing teeth as long as her fingers. Then it spoke. "You carry the Luna mark, child." The voice was female, rough as gravel and layered with power that made the air itself seem heavier. "What are you doing in my territory?" Celine's mind reeled. Wolves could communicate in their animal forms, but it was usually simple, emotional, not full sentences with perfect clarity. Not like this. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I didn't know this was claimed. I'll leave." The wolf sat, which somehow made her look even larger. "That mark on your skin. Let me see it." Every instinct told Celine this was a terrible idea, but something in that ancient voice pulled at her, commanded without threatening. She slowly turned and pulled aside her cloak and shirt, exposing the Luna mark on her shoulder blade. The massive wolf went completely still. "Impossible," she breathed. "That's not just any Luna mark. That's old blood. Ancient blood." "Child, who marked you?" "The Moon Council said." "I don't care what those fools said." The wolf rose and moved closer, circling Celine with predator grace. "That mark is older than the Council. Older than the current kingdoms. It's from the first pack bloodline." Celine's wolf perked up. "What does that mean?" "It means, child, that you're not just some random Luna." The wolf completed her circle and fixed those amber eyes on Celine's face. "You're descended from the very first wolves who could shift, the ones who made the kingdoms, the ones who shaped the bloodlines and wrote the laws everyone else follows. That's not possible." Celine shook her head. "I'm from a border pack. My parents were teachers. There's nothing special about my bloodline. Then your parents lied or they didn't know." The wolf's voice went quiet, almost reverent. "The first pack. Luna mark hasn't appeared in 600 years. The bloodline was thought extinct." Celine's legs gave out. She sat hard on the ground, mind spinning. None of this made sense. She was nobody. She was the girl who'd been rejected in front of 5,000 wolves because she was too weak, too common, too worthless. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "The mark. What does it do?" The massive wolf lowered herself to the ground, bringing her head level with Celine's. "It means you have power inside you that hasn't woken up yet. Power that your little alpha king couldn't sense because he's too busy building empires to understand what true strength looks like." She showed her teeth in what might have been a smile. "It means he rejected the one Luna in 1,000 years who could have actually matched him." Celine's chest tightened. "He said I was weak. You are weak. Right now." The wolf's honesty was brutal. "You're untrained, unprepared, and you just got your soul torn in half. But that's not what you'll always be." The wolf's amber eyes seemed to glow brighter. "The first pack bloodline doesn't create followers, child. It creates leaders. It creates the Lunas who command alphas instead of obeying them." Something stirred in Celine's chest. Not the bond that was dead and gone, but something older. Something that had been sleeping beneath her skin her entire life. The Luna mark burned suddenly hot, a flare of heat that made her gasp. The massive wolf's nostrils flared. "There. You feel it. That's your bloodline waking up." "What do I do?" Celine looked at her hands like they belonged to a stranger. "I don't know how—" "You learn," the wolf interrupted. "You survive. You train. And you become what that mark says you already are." She rose to her feet, towering over Celine. "My name is Thera. I've lived in these wild lands for 40 years, and I know things the kingdoms have forgotten. I can teach you." Celine's wolf surged forward. "Say yes. Say yes right now." But Celine hesitated. "Why would you help me?" Thera's amber eyes held secrets and grief, and something that looked like hope. "Because 600 years ago, my great-grandmother served a first-pack Luna, the last one. And when the kingdoms tore themselves apart in war and that Luna died, my great-grandmother swore an oath that if the bloodline ever returned, her line would serve it again." She lowered her massive head. "I've been waiting my whole life for that mark to reappear. I didn't think I'd live to see it." Celine's throat closed. She'd been rejected, cast out, humiliated. She'd walked into these wild lands expecting to die. But instead, she'd found something impossible. A guardian, a teacher, a wolf who looked at her and saw potential instead of weakness. The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the clearing with light. Celine stood and met Thera's eyes. "Teach me." The massive wolf's lips pulled back in a fierce smile. "First lesson," she said. "A rejected Luna has nothing left to lose, and that makes her the most dangerous creature in all the kingdoms." Far to the south at the Northern Empire's capital, Alpha King Kael Stormborn stood on his balcony and watched the sun rise over his territory. The ceremonial hall was being cleaned. His advisors were already arranging meetings to discuss alternative Luna candidates, and his empire continued exactly as it always had. He felt nothing about the rejection. No guilt, no regret, no doubt. He'd made the right choice, the necessary choice. Border Pack blood would have weakened his line and insulted his allies. He'd rejected a mistake before it could become a disaster. The Luna mark on his own shoulder, the Alpha King's mark that was supposed to match his destined mates, had burned for hours after the rejection, fighting against the severing. But it had finally gone cold and quiet just before dawn. The bond was dead. The mistake was corrected. Kael turned away from the sunrise and walked back into his palace, already thinking about alliance treaties and border disputes and the 100 other things that actually mattered. He never noticed the way his mark flickered once in the shadows, dark and angry, and not quite as dead as he thought. Thera's territory wasn't a territory in the traditional sense. It was a graveyard of old kingdoms, crumbling stone structures half swallowed by forest, ancient pack boundaries marked by bones that had turned white with age, the skeletal remains of what the wild lands used to be before the current empires rose and pushed everything dangerous north into the forgotten places. Celine followed the massive wolf through terrain that got rougher with every mile. Her legs burned, her feet bled inside her boots. She'd been walking for 6 hours straight, and Thera hadn't slowed once, just kept that steady predator pace that ate up ground without seeming to hurry. "Keep up, child." Thera's voice echoed in Celine's mind, that strange ancient magic that let her speak clearly even in wolf form. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" Celine's lungs were on fire. "I thought you lived alone." "I do." Thera's amber eyes gleamed. "But you can't train in the middle of nowhere with no resources. We're going somewhere special." They broke through a dense line of pines, and Celine stopped dead. A valley spread before them, hidden between two mountain ridges like a secret carved into the earth itself. At its center stood the ruins of what must have been a massive compound once. Stone buildings with collapsed roofs, a great hall that had lost half its walls, training yards overtaken by wild grass. But the bones of it were still there, still visible, the layout of a pack structure that had housed hundreds. "What is this place?" Celine breathed. "The first pack's northern stronghold." Thera patted down the slope toward the ruins. 600 years ago, this was the most powerful seat in all the territories. The Luna who carried your mark ruled from here. She commanded 12 alpha bloodlines and kept the peace for 2 centuries. What happened to her? War. Thera's voice went cold. The alphas got greedy, started fighting over territory and power. The Luna tried to stop it, tried to force them back to the old ways. They killed her for it. She stopped at the entrance to what had been the Great Hall. After she died, the first pack bloodlines scattered. Some went into hiding, some were hunted down. The stronghold was abandoned, and the kingdoms agreed to never speak of it again. Celine walked through the entrance, her boots echoing on ancient stone. The interior was open to the sky where the roof had caved in, but the walls still stood, covered in carvings that made her breath catch. Wolves in their animal forms, rendered in stone with such detail she could see individual strands of fur. And among them, figures that were clearly Luna, females with the same mark Celine carried burned into their shoulder blades, standing tall among warriors twice their size. These were the leaders. Celine touched one of the carvings, felt the Luna mark on her own shoulder pulse with heat. These weren't just mates, they were rulers. The first pack understood what the modern kingdoms forgot. Thera shifted, her massive wolf form rippling and condensing until a woman stood there instead, tall and dark-skinned with silver-streaked hair and those same amber eyes. She was naked, but moved without self-consciousness, already walking toward a side chamber where fabric and supplies were clearly stored. Alphas have strength and aggression. Lunas have something more dangerous. They can unite what alphas tear apart. A true Luna doesn't stand behind her alpha. She stands beside him and makes sure his strength doesn't destroy everything. Celine's wolf stirred, hungry for those words. We can learn this. If you survive the training, Thera said, emerging in simple leather clothing. Most don't. Most? I've trained 12 wolves over the years, rogues, outcasts, females who stumbled into my territory with nowhere else to go. Thera's expression went flat. 3 of them lived. The others couldn't handle what I taught them. Celine's throat went dry. What happened to them? They broke. Thera met her eyes. Training your wolf isn't like training your body. It's forcing your animal side to surface when every instinct says to keep it buried. It's facing every fear and weakness and dark thought you've ever had and wrestling them into submission. Some wolves can't do that. They shatter instead. And if I shatter, then you die in these ruins and I bury you with the others. Thera's voice held no sympathy. But I don't think you will. You've already been broken once, rejected in front of your entire world and survived it. That gives you an edge the others didn't have. Celine looked at the carved lunas on the walls again, at the strength in their stone faces. What do we do first? We see what you're made of. Thera smiled, sharp and predatory. Strip. Check. The training yard behind the Great Hall was overgrown but still usable, a wide circle of packed earth surrounded by crumbling stone walls. Thera stood in the center in her wolf form again, massive and still, while Celine stood opposite in just her underclothes, already shivering in the mountain air. Shift, Thera commanded. Celine had been shifting since she was 13, that magical moment when a wolf's animal side finally matured enough to take physical form. It should have been easy. It should have been instinct. She reached for her wolf and got nothing. Her wolf was still there. She could feel her, but she'd withdrawn so deep after the rejection that Celine couldn't pull her forward. The pain of the severed bond had damaged something, created a wall between human and animal that hadn't existed before. I can't, Celine said, panic rising. She's not responding. Then make her respond. Thera's voice was merciless. Your wolf isn't separate from you. She's not a passenger. She's you, the part of you that's pure instinct and survival. If she won't surface, it's because you're too afraid to let her. I'm not afraid. Liar. Thera began to circle, slow and predatory. You're terrified. You spent your whole life being told to be smaller, quieter, weaker. Then you got a taste of real power with that Luna mark, and it scared you so badly you let your wolf hide rather than face what you could become. That's not true. Prove it. Thera's circling tightened. Shift. Right now. Or I end this training before it starts, and you can go die in the woods like every other weak wolf who couldn't handle the wild lands. Anger flared in Celine's chest, hot and sudden. Her wolf stirred at that anger, responding to the challenge in a way she hadn't responded to anything since the rejection. You think I'm weak? Celine's hands clenched into fists. You think I came all this way to quit? I think you came here because you had nowhere else to go. Thera stopped circling and faced her directly. But staying here requires more than desperation. It requires you to stop being the victim and become the predator. So shift or get out. The anger built, fed by every humiliation of the past 3 months. Every cold look from Kael's advisors, every whisper about her worthless bloodline. Every moment standing on that platform while 5,000 wolves watched her get destroyed. The rage grew, and suddenly her wolf was there, surging forward, done hiding. Celine's bones cracked. Her spine bent. Her skin split as fur erupted across her body in a wave of transformation that hurt like it never had before. She fell to her hands and knees as her limbs reformed, as her face elongated into a muzzle, as her human consciousness compressed down to make room for the animal. She shifted. And her wolf was rage incarnate. Celine's wolf form was smaller than Thera's. Most wolves were, but she was fast, and she was furious, and she launched herself at the massive wolf without thinking. Teeth and claws and pure animal aggression, trying to tear into the creature who'd pushed her. Thera didn't even move. Just stood there while Celine's attack landed, teeth scraping off thick fur and finding no purchase. Then Thera shifted her weight, and Celine went flying, hitting the packed earth hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Pathetic. Thera's voice was disappointed. All rage, no control. You fight like a feral. Celine scrambled to her feet, sides heaving. Her wolf wanted to attack again, wanted blood and violence and revenge for every hurt. But Thera's words cut through the rage. Control. She needed control. Celine forced herself still. Forced her wolf to think instead of just react. Her animal side fought against it, wanted to keep attacking, but Celine held firm. Better. Thera circled again. Your wolf is strong, raw, untrained, but strong. That's good. We can work with strong. She stopped. Now, shift back. Shift. Celine reached for her human form and found the wall again. Her wolf didn't want to let go, was still riding the rage, still hungry for a fight. The shift back was always supposed to be easier than the shift out. Returning to your birth form was like coming home, but her wolf was digging in, refusing. I said shift back, Thera commanded. I'm trying, Celine thought desperately. She won't let me. Then you're not strong enough yet. Thera sat. Your wolf thinks she's in charge now because you let her out. You need to show her that you're both in charge, human and animal, working together, not fighting for dominance. How? Force it. Thera's amber eyes held hers. Your human side has willpower. Use it. Make your wolf understand that you're not two separate creatures fighting for control. You're one creature with two forms, and you choose which one you wear. Celine closed her wolf eyes and went inside herself to that place where human and animal met. Her wolf was there, still angry, still wild, still convinced that staying in this form was safer than being vulnerable and human again. We're stronger like this, her wolf growled. We're not, Celine thought back. We're just hiding again. Different form, same fear, her wolf snarled. He called us weak. They all did. We can't be weak again. And Celine understood then. Her wolf wasn't refusing to shift back out of aggression. She was refusing out of terror, the same terror that had made her hide after the rejection. Being human meant being vulnerable. Being human meant being hurt. We're going to be strong, Celine told her wolf gently, in both forms. But we can't hide in this one forever. We need to learn to be powerful as human and animal. Her wolf's resistance wavered. Trust me, Celine whispered. We're done being weak. But we do this together. Her wolf finally, slowly let go. Celine shifted back, bones reforming, fur receding, human consciousness expanding. She collapsed on the packed earth in her human form, gasping and shaking and covered in sweat. Thera shifted back as well. That took you 4 minutes. We're going to get that down to 4 seconds. Celine couldn't even respond, just lay there trying to remember how to breathe. The shift is the foundation of everything. Thera walked over and looked down at her with those intense amber eyes. Most wolves treat it like a tool, something they do when they need to fight or run. But for a Luna, especially a first-pack Luna, the shift is power itself. You need to be able to move between forms as easily as breathing. No hesitation, no wall between human and animal. Complete integration. Celine finally managed to sit up. How long will that take? For you? Thera tilted her head. Years, probably. But we don't have years, so we're going to compress your training into something brutal and fast. And if you survive it, you'll be functional enough to not die the first time someone challenges you. The first time someone challenges me? Child. Thera's smile was sharp. You're a rejected Luna with a first-pack mark wandering the territories. Every ambitious alpha and power-hungry wolf is going to see you as either a threat or a prize. You need to be able to defend yourself or you'll be dead within a month of leaving here. Celine's blood ran cold. I thought I'd just find somewhere quiet, somewhere to disappear. There is no disappearing with that mark on your skin. Thera touched her own shoulder where Celine's mark would be if she was facing the right direction. That rune announces what you are to every wolf who sees it. The only question is whether you're powerful enough to make them respect it or weak enough to make them try to take it from you. Take it? How would force you into a bond? Thera's voice went flat. An alpha strong enough can try to claim an unclaimed Luna mark, override your choice, and bind you to them. It's brutal, painful, and illegal in most kingdoms. But you're not in a kingdom anymore. You're in the wild lands where the only law is strength. Celine's hand started shaking again. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly very aware that she was sitting half naked in ancient ruins with a wolf who'd just told her that her mark made her a target for every predator in the north. "Hey," Thera's voice softened slightly. "That's why we train. That's why you learn to fight and shift and use the power in your bloodline. So when someone tries to take from you, you can make them regret it." Celine looked up at the massive female. "Why are you really helping me? You said your great-grandmother swore an oath, but she's dead. You don't owe me anything." Thera was quiet for a long moment, amber eyes distant. 40 years ago, I was an alpha's daughter in the Eastern Territories, promised to a male I'd never met to secure my father's alliance. She touched her own shoulder, where scars cut through her dark skin. I said no. Fought back. Killed him when he tried to force the bond. She smiled bitterly. My own father exiled me for it, said I'd dishonored the pack. I've been out here ever since. She met Celine's eyes. I help you because I know what it's like to have wolves with power tell you what you're worth. And I know what it's like to decide they're wrong and make yourself into something they can't control. Celine's throat closed. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Thera shifted back to her wolf form in a fluid ripple of magic that took less than a second. We've got months of training to compress into weeks, and it's going to hurt worse than anything you've survived so far. She showed her teeth. Now get up. We go again. Days blurred into weeks. Time lost meaning in the ruins. Celine woke before dawn every morning to Thera's howl, a sound that cut through sleep like a blade. She'd stumble into the training yard still half asleep and spend hours shifting back and forth until her bones ached and her muscles screamed. Shift to wolf, shift to human, shift to wolf. Over and over until the wall between her two forms finally started to crack. Then came the hunting. Thera would disappear into the forest, and Celine had to track her, using scent and sound and instinct to follow a wolf who'd been surviving in the wild for 40 years. At first, Celine lost the trail within minutes. Thera would appear behind her, disappointed, and make her start over. But slowly, painfully, Celine's senses sharpened. Her wolf's instincts surfaced during her human form, giving her predator focus even on two legs. Fighting came next, and that was where Celine learned what real pain felt like. Thera didn't hold back. Every training session left Celine bloody and bruised, bones fractured, skin split. Her wolf's healing kicked in faster than it ever had before, but Thera never gave her time to fully recover, just pushed her back into the fight, forced her to keep moving through the pain. You heal fast because you're young and your bloodline is strong, Thera said, standing over Celine's gasping form after she'd taken a hit that cracked 2 ribs. But healing doesn't mean anything if you're dead before it kicks in. She extended a hand. Get up. We go until you can land a real hit. It took 3 weeks before Celine managed it, a strike that actually knocked Thera back a step. The massive wolf looked surprised for half a second, then grinned with all her teeth showing. There, she said, that's your first real victory. Savor it. Tomorrow we train twice as hard. At night, when Celine collapsed in the small room she'd claimed in the ruins, Thera would sit with her and talk about the old ways. About how Lunas used to command respect through more than just being an alpha's mate. About the ancient magic that ran through first-pack bloodlines. Power that had been suppressed and forgotten but could be relearned. Your mark isn't just decorative, Thera explained one night, while Celine pressed a cloth to a bleeding cut above her eye. It's connected to your wolf in ways other marks aren't. First-pack Lunas could do things normal wolves can't. Like what? Like call other wolves to them. Thera's eyes gleamed in the firelight. A first-pack Luna with a strong enough will could pull on pack bonds, even bonds that weren't hers. She could force submission from wolves who outranked her. She could unite bloodlines that hated each other. That sounds like mind control. It's influence. Thera leaned forward. Your voice carries weight when you learn to use it properly. Your commands hit different. It's not magic in the flashy sense. You can't throw fire or turn invisible. But you can make a beta hesitate before attacking. You can make warriors question their alpha's orders. She smiled. That's why the old alphas killed the last first-pack Luna. She was becoming more powerful than all of them combined. Can you teach me that? Eventually. Thera stood and stretched. Right now we're still working on making sure you don't die in a basic dominance fight. The fancy power comes later. But as the weeks passed, Celine started to feel it. That strange weight in her voice when she gave her wolf commands. The way Thera sometimes paused when Celine spoke. like something was pulling at her attention even though Celine hadn't consciously done anything. The Luna mark on her shoulder burned hotter every day, like it was waking up along with her. 2 months into training, everything changed. Celine was in the forest hunting rabbits, part of her survival training, when her wolf froze mid-stride. Something's wrong. Celine shifted to human form and listened. At first she heard nothing unusual, just forest sounds. Then she caught it. Voices. Multiple wolves speaking low and angry. She moved toward the sound, using the stealth training Thera had beaten into her. Through the trees she spotted them, 5 wolves in human form, all male, all carrying the bearing of wolves who were used to violence. Rogues, her wolf identified. Dangerous ones. They were arguing over something on the ground. Celine crept closer and her blood went cold. A female wolf lay unconscious in the dirt, hands bound, bleeding from a head wound. Young, maybe 16. Her clothes marked her as pack, not rogue. She wore colors that Celine vaguely recognized from one of the smaller western territories. Found her wandering alone, one of the males was saying. Stupid pack wolf got lost. What do we do with her? Another asked. What do you think? The first male grinned. She's unclaimed. No mark. We take turns, kill her, leave her for the crows. Celine's wolf snarled. We can't let that happen. There's 5 of them, Celine thought back, even as rage built in her chest. We've only been training for 2 months. We're not strong enough. Then we get strong enough right now. Her wolf pushed forward, and Celine felt the shift coming without even consciously choosing it. No. Celine forced herself still, thinking fast. 5 on 1 and we die in seconds. We need an advantage. The Luna mark on her shoulder flared hot, and Celine remembered what Thera had said about influence, about the weight in her voice, about forcing submission. She'd never tried it intentionally before, but this girl was going to die if Celine didn't do something. She stepped out of the trees in her human form, unarmed and appearing casual. All 5 males spun toward her, instantly alert. The one who'd been talking pulled a knife. Walk away, little wolf, he growled. This doesn't concern you. Celine's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. Let her go. The male laughed. Or what? Celine met his eyes and pulled on something deep inside her, something connected to the burning mark on her shoulder blade. Let her go, she repeated, and this time her voice carried that strange weight, that pressure that made the air itself seem heavier. The male's smile faltered. His knife hand wavered. The others noticed immediately. What are you doing? Growled one of them. I don't... The first male shook his head like he was trying to clear it. I don't know. His eyes found Celine's again, and this time there was confusion mixed with the aggression. What are you? Celine had no idea if this was working or if she was about to die, but she pushed harder, put everything she had into her voice. I said, let her go. The male's knife clattered to the ground. His companions snarled and moved toward Celine, but the first male held up a hand to stop them. His face had gone blank, caught between his own will and the pressure Celine was exerting. Something in him recognized what she was, even if he couldn't name it. Take her and go, he finally said, voice rough. The others stared at him. Are you insane? I said go, he snapped, and the command in his voice made them back down. Whatever this female is, she's not worth it. Celine didn't waste time. She walked forward, legs shaking but keeping her pace steady, and knelt beside the unconscious girl. Lifted her carefully. The girl was small, lighter than Celine expected. She backed toward the trees with her burden, never taking her eyes off the 5 males. The first male watched her go with an expression caught between fury and fear. If I see you again, he said quietly, I won't hesitate. Good, Celine answered, neither will I. She disappeared into the forest and ran. Sat. Thera was furious. You did what? The massive wolf's voice was pure rage as Celine finished explaining what had happened. You confronted 5 rogue males alone? Without backup? Without even telling me where you were going? They were going to kill her, Celine shot back. The unconscious girl lay on a bed in one of the ruins' intact rooms, still breathing but not awake yet. What was I supposed to do? Just walk away? Yes! Thera shifted to human form so she could yell properly. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. You're not ready to face rogues, let alone 5 of them. You could have died. But I didn't, Celine said quietly. I used what you taught me. The influence. It worked. Thera went very still. Show me. What? Your shoulder. Show me your mark. Celine pulled her shirt aside. The Luna mark was glowing, actually glowing with a faint silver light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She hadn't even realized it was visible. Thera breathed out slowly. It's active. She stepped closer, studying the mark with intense focus. You pulled on your first pack power and it responded. 2 months of training and you managed to force submission on a rogue alpha. She looked up at Celine's face. Do you have any idea how impossible that should be? It didn't feel impossible. It felt necessary. That's the point. Thera's voice softened. Your bloodline doesn't activate based on training or time. It activates based on need. When you're pushed to protect or defend or survive, that's when the real power surfaces. She touched Celine's shoulder just below the mark. But using it has a cost. How do you feel? Now that Thera mentioned it, Celine did feel strange, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion, like something inside her had been drained. Tired, she admitted. Really tired. Your mark pulled on your life force to fuel that influence. It'll come back, but you need to rest. Thera glanced at the unconscious girl. And we need to figure out what to do with her. The girl woke 2 hours later, gasping and fighting until Celine talked her down. Her name was Iris, and she was exactly what Celine had suspected, a low-ranking wolf from the Western Ridge Pack who'd gotten separated during a hunt and ended up lost in rogue territory. I have to get home, Iris kept saying, tears streaming down her face. My family doesn't know where I am. They'll think I'm dead. You can't go home yet, Thera said bluntly. Those rogues you ran into? They're part of a larger group that controls the territory between here and Western Ridge. You try to cross it alone and you will end up dead. Iris's face crumpled. Then I'm stuck here? Celine looked at Thera, then back at Iris. We'll get you home, but it'll take a few days to figure out the safest route. Why would you help me? Iris's voice was small. You don't even know me, because someone helped me once when I had nowhere else to go. Celine squeezed the girl's hand. You're going to be fine. Later, when Iris was asleep, Thera cornered Celine in the great hall. You can't save every lost wolf you find, Thera said quietly. This world is full of victims, and you don't have the strength to help them all. I'm not trying to save everyone. Celine met her eyes. But I had the power to save her, so I did. Isn't that what a Luna is supposed to do? A Luna is supposed to protect her pack. I don't have a pack. Exactly. Thera's amber eyes were intense. You're unclaimed, unmarked. You have no territory, no warriors, no allies. You're building power, but you're doing it alone, and that makes you vulnerable. So what do you want me to do? I want you to think strategically. Thera began to pace. You've been training like your goal is survival, but survival isn't enough. If you're going to carry that mark, if you're going to claim the first pack bloodline, you need to start thinking about what comes after survival. Which is what? Power. Thera stopped pacing and faced her directly. Real power. The kind that makes wolves think twice before crossing you. The kind that protects you from forced bonds and ambitious alphas and every other threat these territories throw at unclaimed Lunas. Celine's chest tightened. I don't want power. I just want to be left alone. Then you should have died in the forest the night you ran from Kael's kingdom. Thera's voice was harsh but not unkind. But you didn't die. You found me. You survived. You're training. That mark on your shoulder is waking up, and soon every wolf in the territories is going to sense it. She moved closer. You can either build something strong enough to protect yourself, or you can keep pretending you're just a victim of circumstance and wait for someone else to decide your fate. The words hit like physical blows, because Thera was right. Celine had been thinking of her training as temporary, something to get her through until she could find a quiet corner of the world to disappear into. But there was no disappearing. The Luna mark guaranteed that. What do I build? Celine finally asked. That's up to you. Thera's expression softened slightly. But whatever it is, it starts with a choice. You decide what kind of Luna you're going to be. The kind who hides in ruins and hopes no one finds her, or the kind who makes wolves think twice before they cross her. Celine looked down at her hands. They were calloused now, scarred from training, stronger than they'd been 2 months ago. Everything about her was stronger, but was it enough? Her wolf stirred. "We are not done yet. We're just starting." Celine looked up at Thera. "Teach me everything, not just how to survive, how to be dangerous." Thera's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Now you're thinking like a Luna." Masyek. 3 days later, Celine and Thera escorted Iris to the edge of Western Ridge territory. They moved through the forest like ghosts, avoiding rogue patrols and dangerous zones, using every trick Thera had spent years perfecting. Iris clung close to Celine the entire journey, clearly terrified but trying to be brave. When they reached the border markers, Iris turned and hugged Celine hard enough to crack ribs. "Thank you," she whispered. "I would have died if you hadn't found me. Go home." Celine squeezed her back. "Be safe." Iris pulled away but hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" Celine nodded. "That mark on your shoulder. I saw it when you were sleeping." Iris's voice dropped. "You're a Luna, aren't you? A real one?" Celine's hand went automatically to her shoulder, covering the mark through her shirt. "Why do you ask?" "Because you move like one. Talk like one." Iris's young face was serious beyond her years. "I've only seen our pack Luna once, but she had the same presence you do. Like even when you're not trying, you make people want to follow you." Celine didn't know what to say to that. "Whoever rejected you was an idiot," Iris said quietly. "Just thought you should know." She disappeared into the trees before Celine could respond, heading home to her pack and her family and her normal life. Celine watched her go and felt something twist in her chest. Grief, maybe, for the normal life she'd never get back. "Come on," Thera said quietly. "We should move before their border patrol spots us." They headed back north toward the ruins, and Celine tried not to think about Iris's words, tried not to let them matter. But they did matter. Because somewhere in the past 2 months, she'd stopped being the broken girl who fled Kael's kingdom. She'd become something else, something stronger. And Iris had seen it without Celine even trying to project it. Back at the ruins that night, Celine sat in what had been the first pack Luna's personal chamber, a room with walls still covered in faded murals of ancient ceremonies. She'd been using it as her sleeping quarters because it felt right somehow, like the space itself recognized what she carried. Thera found her there after midnight, when Celine should have been sleeping but couldn't. "Can't rest?" Thera settled beside her. "I keep thinking about what you said, about building power." Celine traced one of the faded murals, a Luna standing before a gathered crowd of alphas, all of them bowed. "What does that actually look like?" "I can't just declare myself Luna of the wildlands. I don't have a pack. I don't have territory. I don't have anything except a mark and 2 months of training. Then we change that." Thera's voice was quiet but firm. "There's a gathering that happens every year in neutral territory. Rogues, small packs, unclaimed wolves, anyone who doesn't fit into the major kingdoms. It's in 3 months. What kind of gathering? The kind where alliances are made and power is negotiated." Thera met her eyes. The kind where a Luna with a first pack mark could make a serious impression if she played it right. Celine's pulse quickened. "You want me to go there? I want you to consider it. You need allies, Celine. Wolves will stand with you. Right now you're alone and that makes you vulnerable. But if you walked into that gathering with confidence and showed them what you're capable of," she shrugged, "you might find wolves willing to follow a Luna who doesn't have an alpha." The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Celine had spent 2 months learning to survive. But Thera was talking about something different, something bigger. 3 months, Celine said slowly. "That's not enough time. It's what we have." Thera stood. "So we train harder, faster. And when that gathering comes, you're going to walk in there and show every wolf present that rejecting you was the biggest mistake Kael Stormborn ever made." She left Celine alone with that thought, and Celine sat in the ancient Luna's chamber and felt the weight of it settle over her shoulders like a mantle. The next morning, she woke to Thera's howl as always, but this time when she walked into the training yard, something was different. Her shift came faster, her strikes landed harder, her commands carried more weight. The Luna mark on her shoulder blazed with silver light, and for the first time since the rejection, Celine looked at it and didn't see a curse. She saw a weapon. Far to the south, Alpha King Kale Stormborn sat in his council chamber and listened to reports about problems in his territory. Warriors vanishing on patrol, border packs reporting strange disturbances. His advisors were concerned, their voices layered with tension as they detailed each incident. But Kyle barely heard them, because for the third time that week, the mark on his shoulder blade, the Alpha King mark that should have gone completely dormant after the rejection, had flared with heat in the middle of the night. He'd woken in darkness with his mark burning and an inexplicable certainty that somewhere far away something was changing. The bond was dead. He'd severed it completely. But apparently dead didn't mean silent. His Beta Ronin noticed him rubbing his shoulder and frowned. "Still bothering you?" "It's nothing," Kyle said shortly. "Continue the report." But it wasn't nothing. And as his advisors talked about territory and security and threats, Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that the biggest threat to his kingdom wasn't on any of their maps. It was somewhere north of his borders, growing stronger every day, and it carried the Luna mark he'd been stupid enough to reject. 3 months of brutal training had carved Selene into something unrecognizable from the girl who'd fled Kyle's kingdom. Her body was lean muscle and scar tissue. Her wolf responded to her commands instantly now, the shift between forms taking less than 3 seconds. The Luna mark on her shoulder blade had stopped burning and started humming instead, a constant low vibration that reminded her every moment of what she carried. But none of that prepared her for the gathering. They reached the neutral territory at sunset, a massive clearing surrounded by ancient oaks that marked the boundaries where no pack could claim dominance. Already hundreds of wolves had assembled, their camps spreading through the forest in clusters based on allegiance and bloodline. Rogues kept to the outer edges, distrustful and heavily armed. Small packs claimed the better positions near water sources. Unclaimed wolves like Selene moved through the spaces between, trying to look confident while scanning for threats. "Stay close," Thera murmured as they entered the clearing proper. "Every wolf here is measuring you, looking for weakness. Don't give them any." Selene kept her chin up and her shoulders back, moving with the predator grace Thera had beaten into her over months of relentless training. She dressed simply, dark leather pants and a fitted shirt that left her arms bare and the Luna mark visible on her shoulder. Thera had insisted on that visibility. "Let them see what you are," she'd said. "Let them understand they're not dealing with some lost border wolf anymore." Eyes tracked Selene's movement through the gathering. She felt the weight of those stares, felt wolves recognizing the mark and going still. Whispers followed in her wake, too quiet to make out individual words, but loud enough to know she was already becoming a topic of conversation. A massive bonfire burned in the center of the clearing, and around it the highest-ranking wolves had gathered. Alphas from minor packs, a few betas representing larger territories, rogues who'd earned enough respect to sit at the grown-ups table. Selene studied them from a distance, cataloging threats and potential allies with the strategic mind Thera had forced her to develop. "That one." Thera nodded subtly toward a scarred male with gray streaking his dark hair. Alpha Marcus from the Broken Fang Pack. Lost half his territory to Kyle's expansion 5 years ago. He's got reason to hate the Northern Empire. "And her?" Selene indicated a lean female with calculating eyes who sat slightly apart from the others. "Vera the Wanderer." Thera's voice held respect. "She's built a network of rogues and outcasts that stretches across 4 territories. No pack, no allegiance, but she's got more real power than half the alphas here. Those are potential allies. If you can convince them you're worth the risk." Thera's amber eyes gleamed. "But first you need to make an entrance they won't forget." Before Selene could ask what that meant, a howl cut through the gathering, long and commanding, the kind of sound that demanded attention from every wolf present. The conversations died. Everyone turned toward the bonfire. A male wolf stepped into the firelight, and Selene's breath caught. He was enormous even by alpha standards, easily 6.5 feet of pure predator wrapped in ceremonial leathers that marked him as someone important. His hair was the color of old copper, and his eyes were gold, actual metallic gold that reflected the firelight like coins. Power rolled off him in waves that made even the other alphas shift uncomfortably. "Who is that?" Selene breathed. Thera's expression had gone carefully neutral. "That's Damien Ashcroft, Alpha of the Eastern Reaches, and one of the few wolves in these territories who remembers what the first pack actually was." The name hit Celine like a physical blow. Ashcroft. The same surname Kael had spat at her with such contempt when he'd called her bloodline worthless. But her family was from a border pack, teachers and farmers with no connection to power or history. How could she share a surname with an alpha this dominant? Damien's gold eyes swept the gathering and stopped on Celine. For a heartbeat, they locked gazes across the firelight, and Celine felt something ancient and electric pass between them. Recognition. Not the mate bond, that was dead and buried, but something older. Something that pulled at the luna mark on her shoulder until it flared with visible silver light. Damien's eyes widened fractionally. Then he smiled, sharp and predatory, and deeply amused. "Well?" His voice carried to every corner of the clearing without him needing to shout. "It seems the rumors are true. The rejected Luna has found her way to us." The gathering erupted in whispers. Celine felt hundreds of eyes on her again, but this time the weight was different, heavier, more dangerous. Damien had just announced what she was to everyone present, and now they were all recalculating their assessments. Thera moved closer to Celine, a subtle show of backup. "That wasn't supposed to happen," she muttered. "No one here should have known about the rejection. But they do now." Celine forced herself to stay still, to not react to the scrutiny. "How?" Damien stepped away from the bonfire and began walking toward them. Wolves parted to let him through, and Celine noticed several alphas actually bowed their heads as he passed. Whatever power he held, it was significant enough to command respect even from other dominants. He stopped 3 feet from Celine and studied her with those unnerving gold eyes. She forced herself to meet his gaze and not look away, even though every instinct screamed at her to show submission to a wolf this powerful. "Celine Ashcroft," Damien said quietly, and there was something strange in his voice. "Grief, maybe. Or recognition. I thought your line was extinct." "My line?" Celine's hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what you're talking about. My family were border wolves. Teachers. You're not border wolves at all." Damien's smile turned sad. "Your father lied to you, child. He had to. Because if anyone had known what bloodline you actually carried, you would have been killed before you could walk." The world tilted. Celine's wolf surged forward, aggressive and defensive at once. "You're lying. I'm not." Damien gestured to the luna mark on her shoulder. "That's not just any first pack mark. That's the Ashcroft line. The royal bloodline that ruled before the kingdom split." He met her eyes. "Your great-great-grandmother was the last ruling Luna before she was murdered. Your family went into hiding after her death, scattered to the edges of territories, changed their names and histories to survive. But bloodlines don't lie, and that mark proves exactly what you are." Celine couldn't breathe. Her vision swam. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her family, about her place in the world, all of it was crumbling. "Why are you telling me this?" she managed. "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because I've been waiting 30 years for an Ashcroft Luna to return." Damien's voice dropped lower. "Your bloodline and mine were allied in the old days. The Ashcroft Lunas and the Ashcroft Alphas ruled the Eastern Territories together before the kingdoms tore everything apart." He extended his hand. "I'm offering you that alliance again. Join me. Let me teach you what you actually are. Together we could rebuild what was lost." "Don't!" Thera said sharply. "This is a trap." "Is it?" Damien didn't look away from Celine. "Or is it the first real opportunity she's had since that fool Kael rejected her?" He let his hand drop. "I'm not asking you to bond with me. I'm not asking you to be my mate. I'm offering you protection, resources, and training that goes beyond what even Thera can provide." He glanced at the massive female. "No offense, every offense taken," Thera growled. Celine's mind raced. This was everything Thera had said she needed. Allies, power, protection. But something about Damien set off warning bells in her head. He was too smooth, too prepared, like he'd been planning this conversation long before tonight. "I need time to think," Celine said carefully. "Of course." Damien stepped back, giving her space. "The gathering lasts 3 days. Find me when you've made your decision." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Celine? That mark of yours is going to draw attention from wolves far more dangerous than me. You'll want to make your choice before they arrive." He walked away, and the gathering slowly returned to normal conversations. But Celine could still feel eyes on her, could still hear the whispers spreading like wildfire through the crowd. "We're leaving," Thera said flatly. "Right now." "No." Celine's voice came out stronger than she felt. "We came here for allies. That's what we're going to find. Not with him." Thera grabbed her arm. "Damien Ashcroft is old blood and old power, and he doesn't do anything without 12 layers of manipulation attached. Whatever he's offering, it comes with strings." "Everything comes with strings." Celine pulled her arm free gently. "You taught me that. The question is whether I can see the strings before they strangle me." She walked away before Thera could argue further, moving through the gathering with her head high and her heart hammering. She needed space to think, needed to process the bomb Damien had just dropped about her bloodline, needed to figure out if he was telling the truth or just playing a very sophisticated game. She found a quiet spot on the edge of the gathering, near the tree line where the firelight barely reached. Sat down on a fallen log and put her head in her hands. "Your family were border wolves. Teachers. Nothing special. Except apparently that was a lie. Apparently she was descended from the wolves who'd ruled kingdoms before the current empires existed. Apparently her entire life had been built on a foundation of deception meant to keep her alive." The Luna mark on her shoulder pulsed with heat, and Celine wondered if it had always known what she was. If the mark had appeared not because fate made a mistake, but because her bloodline had finally awakened after generations of dormancy. "You look troubled." Celine's head snapped up. A female wolf stood a few feet away, moving so quietly through the shadows that Celine hadn't heard her approach. She recognized her from earlier, Vera the Wanderer, the rogue with the calculating eyes and the network that stretched across territories. "I'm fine," Celine said, which was obviously a lie. Vera smiled slightly. "You're many things, child, but fine isn't one of them." She sat on the log without asking permission, close enough to talk quietly, but far enough to not seem threatening. "Damien's offer rattled you. It was more than an offer. It was a revelation about my entire bloodline. And you don't know whether to believe him." Vera's dark eyes studied her. "Smart. Damien Ashcroft doesn't lie often, but when he does, it's spectacular. However, in this case, I think he's telling the truth." "How would you know?" "Because I remember your great-great-grandmother." Vera's voice went soft. "I'm older than I look. And I was a young wolf when the last Ashcroft Luna ruled. She was the most powerful wolf I've ever seen, commanded 12 alpha bloodlines without raising her voice. When she died, the territories tore themselves apart fighting over the power vacuum she left behind." Celine's throat closed. "What was she like?" "Terrifying and magnificent in equal measure." Vera looked toward the bonfire where Damien was now speaking with other alphas. She united wolves who hated each other, made them work together through sheer force of will. But she also made enemies, and in the end, those enemies killed her during a peace summit. Her own allies stood by and let it happen because they were afraid of how powerful she was becoming. The words landed like stones in Celine's chest. "Is that what you're telling me? That if I claim my bloodline, I'll end up the same way? I'm telling you that power always comes with a price." Vera met her eyes. "The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Because make no mistake, if you accept Damien's offer, if you start down the path of becoming what that mark says you are, there's no going back to being a quiet border wolf. You'll be thrust into politics and power plays and ancient grudges that predate your birth." She smiled without humor. "And you'll make enemies who'll want you dead before you can become what your ancestor was." Celine's hands trembled. She clasped them together to hide it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I liked your ancestor and I've spent 600 years watching the territories tear each other apart in her absence." Vera stood. "If you have even half her strength, you might be able to fix what's broken. But it won't be pretty, and it won't be safe, and you'll probably die trying. That's not exactly encouraging. It's honest, and honesty is the rarest resource in these territories." Vera started to walk away, then paused. "One more thing. Damien Ashcroft wants to rebuild the old alliance, but ask yourself why. What does he gain from having an Ashcroft Luna at his side? Because wolves like him don't offer anything without expecting something better in return." She disappeared into the shadows, leaving Celine alone with her thoughts again. Ushamaik. Celine didn't sleep that night. She sat by her small fire on the edge of the gathering and watched the stars wheel overhead while her mind churned through possibilities and dangers and decisions that felt too big for someone who'd only been training for 3 months. Thera found her just before dawn. "You're going to accept his offer," the massive female said without preamble. "I haven't decided yet." "You've decided." Thera settled beside her. "I can see it in your eyes. You want the power he's offering, the protection, the resources to become what that mark says you are." "Is that so wrong?" Celine looked at her. "You're the one who told me to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking strategically. Damien's offering exactly what I need. At what cost?" Thera's amber eyes were intense. "You think he's doing this out of kindness, out of respect for your bloodline? He's playing a longer game and you're too inexperienced to see all the pieces yet. Then teach me to see them." Celine's voice hardened. "You've trained me to fight and shift and use my influence, but you can't teach me how to navigate alpha politics or rebuild ancient alliances. You've been a rogue for 40 years. Damien knows how kingdoms actually function." The words came out harsher than Celine intended, but they were true. Thera had given her survival skills, but survival wasn't enough anymore. She needed something more, something Damien could provide. Thera's face went carefully blank. "So that's your decision. I'm considering it." "Then consider this." Thera stood, towering over her. "Once you accept his offer, you're his. Maybe not through a mate bond, maybe not officially, but you'll be tied to him through obligation and debt. And when the time comes that he asks you to do something you don't want to do, you'll do it anyway because you'll owe him. What if I'm willing to take that risk?" "Then you're more your ancestor than I thought." Thera's voice held something that might have been approval or might have been disappointment. She walked into her own traps with her eyes open too. She left Celine alone with the sunrise and a decision that felt like choosing between one kind of death and another. Bog. Celine found Damien 2 hours later near the river that cut through neutral territory. He was alone, which surprised her. Alphas, his powerful, usually traveled with guards, but he seemed completely at ease, sitting on a flat rock with his feet in the water like he had no concerns in the world. "I accept your offer," Celine said without preamble, "but I have conditions." Damien smiled without turning around. "Of course you do. You're an Ashcroft. We're not good at accepting help without negotiating terms first. I want to maintain my independence." Celine moved closer but kept distance between them. "I'll ally with you, train with you, learn from you, but I'm not joining your pack. I'm not bowing to your authority. We're equals, or this doesn't work." "Equals?" Damien finally turned to look at her, and his gold eyes held amusement. "You have 3 months of training and a mark you barely know how to use. I have 300 years of experience in an empire that spans 6 territories. We're not equals, child." "Then we have no deal." Celine turned to leave. "Wait." Damien's voice carried that same command she'd heard last night, the weight that made even other alphas pause. He stood and faced her properly. "You want to be treated as equal despite not having earned it yet. Why should I agree to that? Because if you don't, you're just another alpha trying to control me." Celine met his eyes and didn't flinch. "And I'm done being controlled by males who think they know better than I do what I'm worth." Something shifted in Damien's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of something he understood even if he didn't like it. "All right," he said slowly. "We'll call it an alliance of equals. You train with me, learn what I can teach, and in return you lend me the legitimacy your bloodline brings. No pack bonds, no forced obligations. But if I call for your help, you answer. And if you call for mine, I answer. Deal?" Celine considered it. The term seemed reasonable, but Vera's warning echoed in her head. What does he gain from this? What's the longer game? But she was out of options. Thera couldn't teach her what she needed anymore, and staying in the ruins meant staying stagnant while the world moved forward without her. "Deal," Celine said. Damien extended his hand. She took it, and the moment their skin touched, she felt something surge between them. Not the mate bond, but something older. Power recognizing power. Bloodline calling to bloodline. The Luna mark on her shoulder blazed with silver light, and Damien's own mark, an alpha rune she hadn't seen before, flared with gold. They held the connection for 3 heartbeats, then let go. "Welcome to the game, Celine Ashcroft." Damien's smile was sharp. "I hope you're ready for how brutal it gets." The The next 2 days of the gathering passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations. Damien introduced Celine to the alphas and rogues who owed him allegiance or respect, presented her as his ally and the returned Ashcroft bloodline, and watched with clear satisfaction as wolves who'd dismissed her before suddenly treated her with wary deference. Thera kept her distance. Celine caught glimpses of her through the crowd, always watching, always disapproving. They hadn't spoken since their argument by the fire, and the silence between them felt like a chasm Celine didn't know how to cross. On the third night, as the gathering prepared to disperse, Damien called Celine to his tent. "We're leaving at dawn," he said without preamble. "My territory is a week's travel east. You'll stay at my compound while we begin your real training." "Real training?" Celine raised an eyebrow. "What do you call what I've been doing for 3 months?" "Survival skills." Damien poured wine into 2 cups and offered her one. "I'm going to teach you how to be a Luna, how to command, negotiate, manipulate when necessary, how to use your bloodline's influence on a scale Thera couldn't comprehend." He sipped his own wine. "And I'm going to teach you why your ancestor was murdered and how to avoid the same fate." Celine took the cup but didn't drink. "Why do you care so much about this?" "About me?" "Because 600 years ago, my grandfather fought beside your ancestor to build something better than the constant warfare that defined our kind." Damien's gold eyes went distant. When she died, everything collapsed. The territories broke into kingdoms. Alphas started claiming power through violence instead of honor. The first pack ideals died with her. He focused on Celine again. "I want to rebuild that. And I can't do it without an Ashcroft Luna. So I'm a tool, a symbol you need to legitimize whatever empire you're building. You're a tool, the same way I'm a tool." Damien's voice hardened slightly. "We use each other to achieve goals neither of us can reach alone. That's not exploitation, that's strategy." Celine finally sipped the wine. It was rich and complex, expensive in a way that reminded her how far she was from her border pack origins. "And what happens when our goals stop aligning? Then we renegotiate or we part ways." Damien shrugged. "But I don't think that's going to happen, because ultimately we both want the same thing, which is to make sure wolves like Kale Stormborn don't get to dictate the future of our kind." Damien's smile turned cold. "He's a symptom of everything wrong with the modern kingdoms, all aggression and expansion, no thought for the stability or unity his ancestors fought to create. If we don't build something strong enough to oppose him, he'll eventually conquer everything and we'll be back to the dark ages of wolf against wolf until none of us are left." The words made sense. But something about the way Damien said them, about the intensity in his gold eyes, made Celine's instincts scream warning. She ignored them. She'd already made her choice. "I'll be ready at dawn," she said. Damien raised his cup in salute, to unlikely alliances and ancient bloodlines. Celine raised hers in return and drank, sealing a bargain she couldn't yet understand the full weight of. Bewolt. They left the gathering as the sun rose, a group of 20 wolves moving through the forest in tight formation. Damien's guards were professional and cold, treating Celine with careful neutrality that told her they'd been instructed not to challenge her, but also not to trust her. Thera appeared as they were preparing to depart. "So you're really doing this," she said quietly. "I am." Celine faced her, trying to ignore the guilt twisting in her chest. "Thank you for everything you taught me. I wouldn't have survived without you." Survival was just the beginning. Thera's amber eyes were sad. "You're walking into something bigger than you realize, child. Damien Ashcroft is a good teacher, but he's also a master manipulator. Watch him carefully. I will. And watch yourself." Thera reached out and touched Celine's shoulder just below the Luna mark. "Don't lose who you are in the process of becoming what everyone else needs you to be." The words hit harder than Celine expected. She opened her mouth to respond, but Thera had already turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees without looking back. Celine watched her go and felt like she was losing the only person who'd cared about her without wanting something in return. "Ready?" Damien appeared beside her. Celine swallowed the emotion and nodded. "Let's go." They traveled east through territories Celine had never seen, crossing from neutral lands into regions where Damien's influence was obvious. Pack wolves bowed when they passed. Rogues moved aside without being told. By the 4th day, they reached the eastern reaches proper, And Celine understood for the first time exactly how much power Damien actually controlled. His compound made Kael's palace look modest by comparison. It sprawled across a valley like a small city, stone buildings arranged in precise circles around a massive central hall, training yards that could accommodate hundreds of warriors, walls that had been reinforced with both modern engineering and ancient protective runes. Thousands of wolves lived here, all of them loyal to Damien, all of them moving with the kind of discipline that came from decades of careful cultivation. "Welcome to Ashford Hold," Damien said as they crested the ridge overlooking the valley, the seat of the eastern reaches and the last surviving stronghold from the First Pack era. Celine stared at the compound and felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a pack territory. This was a kingdom unto itself, hidden in the eastern mountains where the major empires rarely bothered to look. "You've been building this for how long?" she asked. 300 years. Damien's voice held quiet pride. "Since the day I realized the modern kingdoms were going to tear themselves apart, and someone needed to preserve what the First Pack actually stood for." They descended into the valley, and wolves emerged from buildings to watch them pass. Celine felt their eyes on her, felt them studying the Luna mark on her shoulder, felt the weight of expectations she didn't yet understand settling over her like chains. Damien led her to a building near the central hall, smaller than the others but beautifully appointed, with windows that overlooked the training yards and the valley beyond. "Your quarters," he said. "You'll have privacy here. My own rooms are in the central hall if you need anything." He paused at the door. "Rest today. Tomorrow your real education begins." He left her alone in rooms that were nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived, and Celine stood at the window watching the compound below and wondering if she'd just made the smartest decision of her life or walked straight into a trap more sophisticated than anything she could have imagined. The training Damien provided was nothing like what Thera had taught her. Where Thera had focused on physical skills and wolf instincts, Damien taught politics and manipulation and the brutal mathematics of power. He showed her how to read a room full of alphas and identify who actually held influence versus who just talked loud. He taught her how to use her Lunamark's influence selectively, not a blunt force command, but a subtle pressure that made wolves doubt their own decisions without realizing where the doubt came from. He explained the intricate web of alliances and grudges that defined the territories, showed her which wolves could be bought and which were genuinely loyal. And he told her stories about her ancestor, about the first Ashcroft Luna who'd ruled 600 years ago. She wasn't loved, Damien explained one evening over dinner. She was respected and feared but not loved, because she made hard decisions that saved thousands of lives but cost hundreds in the process. She understood that being a Luna meant sometimes sacrificing the few for the many, and she never flinched from that responsibility. "Is that what you wanted me to become?" Celine asked. "Someone willing to sacrifice people?" "I want you to become someone who understands that power requires difficult choices." Damien's gold eyes were intense. "Your ancestor united the territories by force when negotiation failed. She made alliances that required her to condemn wolves she cared about. She survived assassination attempts from her own allies. And she did it all because she believed the alternative, endless war and suffering, was worse." Sounds lonely. It was, but it was also necessary. Damien leaned forward. "You want to know why I'm training you? Why I care about rebuilding what was lost? It's because I watched the territories tear themselves apart after she died. I watched alphas slaughter each other over scraps of power. I watched packs starve because their leaders were too busy fighting to hunt, and I swore I'd never let it get that bad again. So you want me to be her, to make the same sacrifices. I want you to be strong enough to survive what's coming." Damien's voice dropped. "Because Kael Stormborn isn't going to stop expanding his empire. He's going to keep conquering and absorbing until he controls everything. And when he does, he'll have enough power to remake our entire kind in his image. All strength, no honor, no unity. Just dominance through violence." The word sent ice through Celine's veins. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to stop him before he gets that far. And you're the key to doing it." "How?" "Because you're the Luna he rejected." Damien smiled coldly. Every wolf in the territories has heard that story by now. The Alpha King who spat in Fate's face and severed his bond. Some think he was strong for doing it, but many think he made a catastrophic mistake. He stood. "If you appear as a fully trained, powerful Luna an Ashcroft with the full backing of the Eastern reaches, it'll undermine his authority, make wolves question if he's fit to rule. And when his empire starts to crack, we'll be there to offer them something better. Celine's heart hammered. You want to use me as a weapon against Kael. I want to use us both as weapons against a system that's destroying our kind. Damien walked to the window. Kael is just the current symptom. The real disease is the kingdom structure itself. Alphas hoarding power, treating Lunas as accessories, breaking the sacred bonds that are supposed to unite us. We need to tear that down and rebuild it properly. And if I don't want that, if I just want to be left alone, then you shouldn't have accepted my offer. Damien glanced back at her. You knew what this was when you agreed to ally with me. Don't pretend you didn't understand the implications. He was right. Celine had known, but hearing it stated so bluntly, understanding that she was being positioned as a chess piece in a game that would inevitably put her in direct conflict with Kael, it was overwhelming. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need. Damien's voice was almost kind. But think quickly, because in 2 months I'm hosting a summit of all the independent territories, and I intend to present you there as my ally and proof that the old bloodlines are returning. That's when everything changes. He left her alone in the dining room, and Celine sat there with her head spinning and her heart racing and the slow dawning certainty that she'd been maneuvered into exactly the position Damien needed her in. She thought she was making strategic choices, building power, becoming dangerous, but maybe she'd just traded one kind of cage for another. 3 weeks into her stay at Ashford Hold, everything fell apart. Celine woke to screaming. She bolted upright in her bed, disoriented and adrenaline flooded. The screaming continued, multiple voices, panicked and terrified. She threw on clothes and ran outside to find the compound in chaos. Warriors rushing toward the central hall, wolves shifting mid-run. The acrid smell of smoke and something worse, blood, fresh and abundant. Celine grabbed a passing guard. What's happening? Attack! The male gasped. Someone breached the walls. They're in the central hall. Where's Damien? Inside. The guard pulled free and kept running. Celine's wolf surged forward. She shifted mid-stride and ran toward the central hall on 4 legs, faster than she could have moved as human. Around her, the compound had become a war zone. Fighting in the training yards, bodies on the ground, warriors engaging enemies she couldn't clearly see in the darkness and chaos. She burst through the hall's main entrance and skidded to a stop. The interior was carnage. Dead wolves everywhere, blood painting the ancient stone, and in the center of it all, Damien on his knees, wounded and surrounded. And standing over him with a blade to his throat was Beta Ronan, Kael's right hand, wearing a smile like a knife. Celine's world stopped. Ronan, she breathed. He looked up at her entrance, and his smile widened. Hello, Border Wolf. Been a while. Other wolves moved out of the shadows then, and Celine recognized them with growing horror. Third Commander Darius, High Warrior Petra, a dozen of Kael's elite fighters, all of them here, all of them responsible for the bodies scattered across the hall. What have you done? Celine's voice came out strangled. What we came to do. Ronan pressed the blade harder against Damien's throat. Kael sends his regards. And Celine understood. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't a rogue attack or territory dispute. This was assassination, planned and executed by the Northern Empire itself. But why? She looked at Damien, at the blood soaking his clothes, at the defeat in his gold eyes. Why attack him? He's not your enemy. He was planning to use you against our Alpha King. Ronan's voice was cold. Did you really think we wouldn't find out? Did you think Damien's plans could stay secret? He's been building this alliance for months, positioning you as a weapon to undermine Kael's rule. He gestured at the dead wolves around them. This is what happens to those who plot against the Northern Empire. No. Celine's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees. This isn't... I wasn't... You were, Ronan interrupted. Maybe you didn't realize it. Maybe Damien kept you ignorant of the full plan. But you've been a threat to our king since the moment you allied with this male. He looked down at Damien. Any last words before I end 600 years of Ashcroft manipulation? Damien's gold eyes found Celine's. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I thought I had more time to teach you, to prepare you for what comes next. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. The summit invitation. It's in my desk. Second drawer. Take it. Use it. Become what I couldn't. Ronan slit his throat. Blood fountained. Damien's body convulsed once, then went still. And Celine screamed, a sound that was part human grief and part wolf rage, so loud it echoed off the stone walls and made even Ronan's warriors flinch. The Luna mark on her shoulder exploded with silver light, brighter than it had ever burned before. Power surged through Celine's body, the first pack bloodline responding to her anguish and fury and absolute devastation. She shifted without meaning to, her wolf form bursting out in a wave of transformation so violent it felt like her skin was tearing itself apart. And her wolf was bigger than before, stronger, touched by whatever ancient power had just awakened in response to Damien's death. Celine launched herself at Ronan. She hit him like a freight train, teeth finding his shoulder and tearing deep. He went down hard, his blade clattering away. His warriors surged forward, but Celine was already moving, already tearing into them with claws and teeth and pure animal savagery. She didn't fight like Thera had taught her. She didn't use strategy or control. She just fought like something feral and broken, trying to tear apart the wolves who'd destroyed the first real chance she'd had at building power. She took down 3 of them before a blade found her side. Pain exploded through her ribs. She yelped and stumbled, and that moment of weakness was all Ronan needed. He shifted to his own wolf form, massive and scarred and far more experienced, and hit her hard enough to crack bone. Celine's wolf form flickered. She struggled to hold it, but the pain was overwhelming, the injury too severe. She shifted back to human without meaning to and lay gasping on the blood-soaked floor. Ronan shifted back as well and stood over her, breathing hard. "That was stupid," he said. "You could have walked away from this. Could have disappeared after Damien died and we never would have bothered hunting you, but you attacked us." He crouched down, putting his face close to hers. "Now you're coming back to the Northern Empire. And Kael is going to decide what to do with the Luna he rejected." "No," Celine gasped. "Please." "Bind her," Ronan ordered his warriors. "And someone find out if any of Damien's people survived. I want complete casualties before we leave." They wrapped silver chains around Celine's wrists, the kind that burned wolfskin and suppressed shifting, dragged her to her feet even though the wound in her side was still bleeding. She looked at Damien's body one last time, at the male who'd promised to teach her how to be powerful and had instead gotten her captured by the very king who'd rejected her. The summit invitation is in his desk. The thought pierced through her pain and terror. Whatever Damien had been planning, whatever chance he'd seen for her to become something dangerous, it died with him tonight. Unless she found a way to survive what came next. Ronan's warriors dragged her out of the hall and into the compound beyond, where the fighting had ended and Damien's wolves lay dead or captured. The eastern reaches had fallen in a single brutal night, and Celine had lost her only real ally. Now she was going back to face the Alpha King who'd destroyed her once before. And this time, she had no idea if she'd survive it. The journey back to the Northern Empire took 5 days, and every mile felt like dying slowly. They kept Celine in silver chains the entire time, wrists bound behind her back, the metal burning through her skin until the wounds wouldn't heal properly. The pain was constant and exhausting, a reminder with every breath that she was caught, defeated, being dragged back to the one place she'd sworn never to return. Ronan's warriors didn't speak to her, didn't acknowledge her except to shove her forward when she stumbled or drag her back to her feet when exhaustion made her collapse. They moved through territories with brutal efficiency, avoiding populated areas, keeping to routes that meant Celine had no chance of screaming for help even if she'd had the strength. At night they chained her to trees while they slept in shifts, and Celine sat in the darkness with the Luna mark on her shoulder, burning like accusation. All that training with Thera, all those weeks with Damien learning politics and manipulation, and she'd ended up right back where she started, powerless, captured, at the mercy of wolves who saw her as nothing more than a problem to be dealt with. Her wolf was silent, withdrawn deep inside after the injuries from fighting Ronan. Celine couldn't blame her. They'd lost. They'd tried to become dangerous, and instead they'd walked straight into a trap that got their only ally killed. On the 4th night, Ronan finally spoke to her. He approached where she was chained, carrying food and water that she hadn't asked for, set it down within reach, and crouched to study her with those cold, dark eyes. "Eat," he said. "Kael wants you alive and conscious when we arrive." Celine didn't move. "Kael can go to hell. He's going to ask you questions. Ronan's voice was matter-of-fact, about Damien's plans, about who else was involved in plotting against the Northern Empire. You can answer honestly and make this easier, or you can be difficult and make it worse. Your choice. I don't know anything, Celine said through cracked lips. Damien didn't tell me his full plans. She stopped, throat closing. He just promised to teach me how to survive. And look how that worked out. Ronan stood. You trusted the wrong wolf, Border Wolf. Damien Ashcroft was building a coalition to oppose Kael's rule. He was using you as the face of it. The rejected Luna returned to undermine the Alpha King's authority. He would have gotten you killed eventually, even if we hadn't intervened. You murdered him. We executed a traitor. There's a difference. He was trying to stop your king from conquering everything, Celine spat, from turning the territories into one massive empire built on violence and fear. How is that treason? Because Kael's empire brings order. Ronan's voice hardened. Before he unified the northern territories, there were 12 packs constantly at war. Border skirmishes every month. Wolves dying for scraps of land and pointless grudges. He ended that. Built something stable. Something that protects thousands of wolves who used to live in fear. By destroying anyone who opposes him. By doing what's necessary. Ronan met her eyes. You think Damien was better? He was building his own empire in the shadows, manipulating wolves through ancient bloodline claims and promises of returning to old ways that never actually worked. At least Kael's honest about his methods. Celine wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. Maybe they were both wrong. Maybe the territories were just doomed to be ruled by aggressive males who thought strength meant domination. Why does Kael even care about me? She asked quietly. He rejected me, severed the bond. Why not just let me disappear into the wildlands? Because you carry a mark that says you're his destined Luna, and as long as you're alive, wolves will question his decision. Ronan's voice went softer, almost sympathetic. You're a threat to his authority just by existing. He needs to deal with that threat permanently. Ice flooded Celine's veins. You mean kill me? I mean, he needs to decide what you are. If you're a legitimate threat who conspired against him, or just a naive girl who got manipulated by a smarter wolf. Ronan straightened. Eat. Rest. We reach the capital tomorrow. He walked away, leaving Celine with food she couldn't stomach, and the cold certainty that she was being brought back to die. Blamch. The Northern Empire's capital looked exactly as Celine remembered. Brutal and magnificent, stone buildings rising from the mountain valley like monuments to conquest. But this time she entered through the back gates in chains, surrounded by warriors, a prisoner instead of an honored guest. Word of her arrival spread fast. Wolves lined the streets to watch her pass, their faces showing everything from curiosity to contempt to pity. Celine kept her eyes forward and her spine straight, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken, even though she felt shattered inside. They brought her to the palace dungeons. Real dungeons, not the converted storage room she'd been given before. Stone cells carved into the mountain itself, cold and dark, and designed to hold the most dangerous criminals. They unchained her only long enough to throw her into a cell, then locked the door with silver-reinforced bars that made her skin crawl just being near them. Celine collapsed on the stone bench that passed for a bed and finally let herself shake. 5 months since she'd fled this kingdom. 5 months of survival and training and trying to become strong enough that no one could hurt her again. And here she was, locked in Kael's dungeons, waiting for the Alpha King who'd rejected her to decide her fate. Her wolf stirred weakly. We're not dead yet. We will be soon. Then we fight. Her wolf's voice gained strength. Even if it's hopeless, even if we lose, we don't just lie down and accept this. What's the point? Celine's exhaustion was bone deep. We tried fighting, we tried getting strong, we lost anyway, because we're still learning. Her wolf pushed closer to the surface. Thera taught us to survive. Damien taught us to see the bigger game. Now we learn how to turn defeat into advantage. How? I don't know yet, but we will. The certainty in her wolf's voice was the only thing keeping Celine from complete despair. She curled on the stone bench and closed her eyes, trying to conserve strength for whatever came next. She woke to the sound of the cell door opening. 2 guards entered, followed by someone Celine hadn't expected to see. Elder Thorn from the Moon Council, looking older and more withered than she remembered. He studied her with rheumy eyes that gave nothing away. "Leave us," he told the guards. They hesitated, clearly uncomfortable leaving a council elder alone with a prisoner, but they obeyed. The door closed behind them. Thorne settled on the stone bench across from Celine with a sigh. "You've caused quite the disruption, child." "I didn't mean to." Celine's voice came out hoarse. "I just wanted to survive. And in doing so, you allied with one of the most dangerous wolves in the territories." Thorne's voice was dry. Damien Ashcroft spent 3 centuries building power in the shadows. He was patient and clever and absolutely committed to tearing down everything the modern kingdoms built. He studied her. Did you know what he was planning? Not fully. Celine met his eyes. He said he wanted to rebuild the old alliances, unite the territories under First Pack ideals instead of through conquest. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. Celine's throat closed. I wanted to believe I could be something other than the weak border wolf Kael rejected. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. "The mark on your shoulder, may I see it?" Celine turned and pulled her torn shirt aside. The Luna mark blazed with silver light even in the dim cell, brighter than it had ever been. Thorne leaned closer, studying it with intense focus. "Extraordinary," he breathed. "It's fully active now, awakened by trauma and necessity, just like the old text described." He met her eyes. "You're more powerful than you realize, child. That mark isn't just symbolic. It's a conduit for ancient magic that most modern wolves have forgotten exists. Then why did Kael reject it? If it's so powerful, because he's afraid of it." Thorne's words were simple and devastating. Kael Stormborn built his empire on being the strongest wolf in any room, but a true Luna, a First Pack Luna with an awakened mark, has the potential to match or exceed an alpha's power. Not through physical strength, but through influence and unity. She can command loyalty that doesn't require fear. Celine's heart hammered. "You're saying Kael knew what I could become and rejected me because of it? I'm saying he felt the potential in your bond and chose to sever it rather than risk being overshadowed." Thorne stood slowly. "He tells himself it was about your lack of training and weak bloodline, but the truth is deeper and more damaging to his pride." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the Moon Council made a mistake." Thorne's voice went heavy. "We should have protected you after the rejection. Should have explained what your mark meant and helped you learn to use it safely. Instead, we let you flee into the wildlands, and now you've become exactly what Kael feared, a Luna powerful enough to threaten his rule." "I'm not threatening anything." Celine gestured at the cell bars. "I'm locked in a dungeon, for now. But that mark of yours is broadcasting power to every wolf in this palace. They can feel it even if they don't understand what they're feeling. And it's making them question things." Thorne moved to the door. "Kael is going to summon you soon. What you say to him will determine whether you live or die. Choose your words carefully." He knocked, and the guards opened the door. Thorne left without looking back, and Celine was alone again with too many revelations and not enough time to process them. They came for her at dawn. The guards who'd thrown her in the cell now escorted her through the palace with careful neutrality, neither rough nor gentle. They'd given her clean clothes, simple dark pants and a shirt that left the Luna mark visible, and she understood the message. Kael wanted her presented as what she was, not hidden or diminished. They walked through corridors Celine remembered from her time here, past rooms where advisors had criticized everything about her, through halls where she'd been made to feel small and worthless. But this time something was different. This time the wolves they passed didn't look at her with contempt. They looked at her with wariness and something that might have been respect. The Luna mark on her shoulder pulsed with steady light, visible even through her shirt. Celine could feel it broadcasting something, presence, power, the weight of ancient bloodlines. And she realized Thorne was right. Every wolf in this palace could sense what she carried now, even if they didn't consciously understand it. The guards brought her to the throne room, the massive ceremonial hall where Kael had rejected her 5 months ago. But instead of being packed with 5,000 witnesses, it was empty except for a handful of wolves. Kael's inner circle. Beta Ronin, 3rd Commander Darius, a few high advisors. And at the far end, sitting on a throne carved from black mountain stone, was Kael Stormborn. Celine's breath caught. She'd spent 5 months trying not to think about him, trying to push away the memory of those pale eyes looking at her with disgust. But seeing him again brought it all back. The humiliation, the pain, the absolute devastation of being rejected in front of her entire world. He looked exactly the same. Brutal and beautiful, all sharp edges and predator grace wrapped in formal leathers. His pale blue eyes tracked her approach with an expression she couldn't read. The severed mate bond stayed silent. That was still dead, still empty where something sacred used to live. But Celine felt something else, a pull that had nothing to do with fate and everything to do with unfinished business between them. The guard stopped her 20 feet from the throne and stepped back. Celine Ashford. Kael's voice was exactly as she remembered, cold and commanding. You stand accused of conspiracy against the Northern Empire, of allying with known traitors, of plotting to undermine my rule through manipulation and ancient bloodline claims. I didn't plot anything, Celine said, keeping her voice steady. Damien offered me training and protection. I accepted because I had nowhere else to go. You accepted because he promised you power. Kael leaned forward slightly. He told you that your bloodline was special, that you were descended from the old ruling families, that together you could rebuild what was lost and oppose the modern kingdoms. He told me my family lied about our history. Celine met Kael's eyes. That we weren't border wolves at all, that I carried blood from the first pack. And you believed him. I didn't know what to believe. I still don't. Celine's hands clenched. All I know is that you rejected me, cast me out, and I've spent 5 months trying to survive in a world that sees me as either a threat or a prize. Damien was the first wolf who looked at me and saw potential instead of weakness. Something flickered in Kael's expression, too fast to identify. Damien Ashcroft was a manipulator, Ronan said from his position beside the throne. He's been building opposition to the Northern Empire for decades. He used you as a figurehead because your mark gave him legitimacy with traditional wolves who still believe in the old ways. Maybe he did, Celine shot back. But he also taught me that I don't have to accept being treated as worthless just because an alpha says I am. The words landed harder than she'd intended. The throne room went completely silent. Kael stood slowly, and the movement was pure predator threat. You dare speak to me like that? Why not? Celine's fear was transforming into anger, hot and reckless. You already rejected me, already destroyed any bond between us. What else can you take from me? My life? She laughed bitterly. Go ahead. At least then I won't have to spend another day being reminded that the wolf fated to be my mate looked at me and decided I wasn't worth keeping. The Luna mark on her shoulder blazed suddenly bright, silver light flooding the throne room. And Celine felt it. That ancient power Thorn had talked about, surging through her in response to her fury and pain. Her voice gained that weight, that pressure that made even alphas hesitate. You want to know if I plotted against you? Fine. I'll tell you the truth. She stepped forward and the guards moved to stop her, but froze when the Luna mark's light intensified. I didn't plot anything. But if Damien had lived long enough to teach me everything he knew, if I'd learned to use this mark properly, yeah, I would have come for you. Not to overthrow your empire or start a war, just to make you understand what you threw away when you rejected me in front of 5,000 witnesses. Kael's pale eyes had gone wide. The mark on his own shoulder, the Alpha King mark, was visible through his shirt, glowing with answering light. The severed bond between them stayed dead, but something else was happening. Something neither of them had expected. The marks recognized each other, called to each other. Not through the mate bond, but through the ancient magic that predated modern wolf customs. Stand down, Kael said quietly, and it took Celine a moment to realize he was talking to his guards, not to her. Everyone out, now. My king, Ronan started. Out, Kael's voice carried absolute command. I'll handle this alone. The guards and advisors filed out, clearly unhappy, but not willing to disobey a direct order. Ronan was the last to leave, shooting Celine a look that promised consequences before he closed the massive doors behind him. Suddenly it was just Celine and Kael, alone in the throne room where he'd destroyed her 5 months ago. The silence stretched. Your mark, Kael finally said. Show me. Celine pulled her shirt aside, exposing the Luna mark fully. The silver light pulsed in time with her heartbeat, brighter than any normal mark should be. Kael descended from his throne and crossed the distance between them. Stopped close enough that Celine could feel the heat radiating off his body, could see the conflict in his pale eyes. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the mark. The moment his fingers made contact, power surged between them like lightning. Not the mate bond, that was still severed, still gone, but something older. The Alpha and Luna marks connecting, recognizing each other as counterparts, even without the bond that should have united them. Kyle jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. Impossible. The bond is dead. This shouldn't... The bond is dead, Celine agreed. But the marks aren't. She met his eyes. Thorn told me they're older than mate bonds, older than the Moon Council. They're from the first pack bloodlines that built the kingdoms before everything fell apart. Which means what you carry isn't just a Luna mark. Kale's voice had gone rough. It's a ruling mark, the kind that was supposed to command alphas, not serve them. Is that why you rejected me? Celine's anger flared again. You felt what I could become and decided you'd rather destroy the bond than risk being challenged? I rejected you because you were weak, Kyle said, but there was no conviction in his voice anymore. Because you had no training, no bloodline, no way to stand beside an alpha king. Liar. Celine stepped closer, watching him stiffen. You rejected me because you were afraid, because that mark scared you more than any enemy army ever could. Careful, Border Wolf. My name is Celine, and according to Damien, my bloodline is Ashcroft, the same family that ruled before your ancestors carved out their little empire. So maybe show some respect to the wolf whose mark matches yours, whether you like it or not. They stood inches apart, both breathing hard, the air between them charged with power and anger and 5 months of unresolved devastation. Why did you really bring me back here? Celine asked quietly. If you just wanted me dead, Ronan could have killed me in Damien's hall. Why drag me all the way to your capital? Kale's jaw worked. Because I needed to see you, needed to understand what you'd become. And what have I become? Dangerous. Kale's pale eyes held hers. Exactly what I feared you'd turn into if you survived long enough. Good. Celine smiled without humor. Maybe next time you'll think twice before throwing away something you don't understand. She turned to leave, but Kael's hand shot out and caught her wrist. The contact sent another shock of power through both of them, the marks flaring in response. Where do you think you're going? Kael's voice was low and dangerous. Back to my cell. Unless you're planning to execute me right here. Celine tried to pull free, but his grip tightened. Let go. Not yet. Kael pulled her closer instead, and suddenly they were pressed together, the marks on their shoulders blazing so bright it hurt to look at. I need to know something. What? If the bond was still intact, if I hadn't severed it 5 months ago, would you have tried to destroy me? Would you have used that mark in Damien's training to tear down everything I've built? Celine looked up at him and saw something she'd never expected to see in Kael Stormborn's eyes. Vulnerability. The smallest crack in that cold facade, showing her a glimpse of the male beneath the Alpha King mask. And she realized the truth. He hadn't rejected her because she was weak. He'd rejected her because the bond had shown him exactly how powerful she could become, and it had terrified him. I don't know, she answered honestly. Maybe. If you'd kept treating me like I was worthless, if you'd kept trying to make me smaller so you could feel bigger. Her voice dropped. But we'll never find out, will we? Because you killed the bond before I could prove whether I was worth keeping. Something in Kael's expression shifted. Regret, maybe. Or recognition of a mistake too big to take back. The throne room doors exploded inward. Kael and Celine both spun to find Ronan standing in the entrance, bloodied and breathing hard. My king, you need to come now. What happened? Kael's command voice snapped back instantly. The eastern borders are under attack. Multiple packs, coordinated assault. Ronan's dark eyes found Celine. Damien's allies. They're calling it revenge for his execution. How many? At least 5 packs. Maybe more. They hit 3 border posts simultaneously and they're pushing inland. Ronan's jaw tightened. They're demanding justice for the Ashcroft bloodline. Celine's blood went cold. They think I planned this, that I'm leading some kind of rebellion. You're not? Kael's voice was sharp. I didn't even know Damien had that many allies, Celine said desperately. I didn't plan any of this. It doesn't matter what you planned. Kael released her wrist and moved toward Ronan. How bad is the damage? 17 warriors dead, 2 border posts completely destroyed. They're moving fast and they're organized. Ronan glanced at Celine again. And they're using her name as a battle cry. The rejected Luna returned to punish the Alpha King who cast her aside. Kael's hands clenched into fists. Mobilize the inner guard. Send word to the allied packs for reinforcements. I want every available warrior at those borders within the hour. Done. Ronan hesitated. What about her? Kael turned and looked at Celine, and she saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. She was either a pawn in this attack or she was innocent. Either way, she'd become the symbol of opposition, whether she wanted to be or not. Bring her, Kael said finally. If her allies are using her name, she's coming to the battlefield to see exactly what her mark inspires. My king, that's... Ronan started. I said, bring her. Kael's voice cut like a blade. Chain her if you have to, but she witnesses what her alliance with Damien has caused. The guards moved forward and Celine didn't resist as they bound her wrists again. But this time the chains were regular metal, not silver. This time they were restraint, not torture. Kael strode from the throne room, and his entire inner circle fell into formation around him. Celine was dragged along in their wake, through corridors filled with running warriors, past rooms being converted to war planning, down into the compound where wolves were already shifting and arming themselves for battle. They're attacking because of me, Celine's wolf said, horrified. Because we allied with Damien. We didn't ask for this. Doesn't matter, we're the symbol now. The rejected Luna returned. Whether we want to be or not. Horses were brought, massive war-trained animals that could carry an alpha's weight. Kael mounted in one fluid motion and gestured for Celine to be put on a horse beside him. She climbed up awkwardly with bound hands, and they rode out with a force of 200 warriors streaming behind them. The journey to the eastern borders took 3 hours at a punishing pace. Celine's body ached from the ride, and her wrists bled where the chains had rubbed skin raw, but none of that compared to the dread building in her chest. Wolves were dying because her name had become a rallying cry. Damien's allies, wolves she'd never met, were attacking Kael's empire and calling it justice for her rejection. She'd wanted to become powerful. She'd wanted to be dangerous, but she'd never wanted this. They crested a ridge and the battlefield spread below them. It was chaos. Hundreds of wolves in both human and animal forms fighting across a valley that had become a killing ground. Kael's warriors in their Northern Empire colors fighting against a coalition of smaller packs, rogues, and what looked like mercenaries hired specifically for this assault. Buildings burned. Blood soaked into the earth. The sounds of combat echoed off the surrounding mountains. And in the center of it all, a banner had been raised, a silver wolf on black fabric, the symbol of the Ashcroft bloodline. Celine's bloodline. Kael surveyed the battlefield with cold assessment. They're better organized than Ronan's report suggested. Because Damien trained them, Ronan said grimly. He's been preparing this coalition for months, maybe years. We just accelerated his timeline by killing him. Can we hold? Kael's voice was flat. If reinforcements arrive from the western packs, yes. If not, Ronan didn't finish the sentence. Kael's pale eyes found Celine. This is what your alliance created. These dead wolves are on you as much as Damien. I didn't ask for this, Celine said, voice breaking. I didn't want any of this. What you wanted doesn't matter. Kael gestured at the battlefield. What matters is that wolves are dying under your symbol, your bloodline, your mark. He leaned closer. So you're going to help me end this. How? I'm not a warrior. You're a Luna with a first pack mark and a bloodline these wolves are dying for. Kael's voice dropped. You're going to go down there and tell them to stand down. Order them to stop fighting in your name. They won't listen to me. Then a lot more wolves are going to die. Kael straightened in his saddle. Your choice, Celine. Be the weak border wolf I rejected, or be the Luna that Mark says you actually are. The words hit like a physical blow. Because he was right. She'd spent 5 months becoming stronger, learning to survive, training to be dangerous. But strength without purpose was meaningless. Being dangerous without being willing to act was just cowardice in a different form. Celine looked at the battlefield again, at the wolves dying under her family's symbol, and made a decision that would change everything. Unchain me, she said. Kael studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded to Ronan. "My king, this is insane," Ronan protested. "Do it!" Ronan unlocked the chains with clear reluctance. Celine rubbed her raw wrists and felt her wolf surge forward, ready and fierce despite the fear flooding her system. "If you betray me down there," Kyle said quietly, "I'll kill you myself. I don't care what mark you carry. I'm not betraying anyone." Celine met his eyes. "I'm ending what Damien started, because he was wrong. Power built on manipulation and ancient grudges isn't strength. It's just another form of conquest with better PR." She dismounted and started walking down the ridge toward the battlefield. Behind her, she heard Kyle give orders to his warriors to hold position unless she signaled otherwise. Heard Ronan arguing that this was suicide. Heard the murmur of wolves questioning if their alpha king had lost his mind. But Celine kept walking. Down the ridge, across the bloodied grass, into the space between the two armies where warriors on both sides slowed their fighting to stare at the female with the glowing Luna mark approaching alone. A massive rogue alpha in wolf form broke from the coalition lines and charged her. Celine's instinct screamed to run, but she forced herself still. Drew on every lesson Thera had taught her about presence and dominance. Let the Luna mark blaze with full power. "Stop!" she commanded, putting everything she had into her voice. The rogue skidded to a halt 10 feet away, confused and aggressive. "All of you!" Celine raised her voice to carry across the battlefield. "Stop fighting. Right now." The combat slowed. Stopped. Wolves on both sides turned to look at her with expressions ranging from shock to anger to something that might have been hope. Celine stood in that space between armies and felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. Felt the power in her mark responding to her will. Felt her wolf pushing her forward when every human instinct wanted to collapse. And she spoke. The battlefield held its breath. Hundreds of wolves, warriors who'd been tearing each other apart moments before, stood frozen with blood on their hands and fury in their eyes, all of them staring at the female standing alone between two armies with a Luna mark blazing silver against her skin. Celine's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Her wolf pressed close to the surface, lending her strength she didn't actually feel. Every instinct screamed that this was insane, that she was going to die here, that no amount of ancient bloodline magic could stop what she'd just walked into. But she'd made her choice. And there was no going back now. "You're fighting for me," she said, her voice carrying across the valley with that weight the Luna mark gave her. "For a bloodline you think I represent. For justice you believe I deserve." Her hands clenched at her sides. "Stop." A female wolf in the coalition ranks shifted to human form, tall and scarred with gray in her dark hair. "We're fighting because that bastard king rejected the moon's choice and murdered Damien Ashcroft in cold blood. We're fighting because the Northern Empire thinks it can destroy anyone who opposes it." "And how many have died today?" Celine gestured at the bodies scattered across the valley. "How many of your packmates are bleeding into this dirt right now? How many more will die if you keep fighting?" "As many as it takes," another wolf called out, "until Kyle Stormborn pays for what he's done." "He will pay," Celine said, and felt the words settle like stones in her chest. "But not like this. Not with you dying under my family's banner for a war I never asked you to fight. You're the rejected Luna." The scarred female's voice was fierce, the one who survived exile and came back stronger. "You're proof that the old bloodlines still matter, that the moon's choices can't be dismissed just because an alpha's too arrogant to accept them." "I'm proof that I'm still alive," Celine corrected. "That's all. I didn't survive to become a symbol for someone else's revenge. I survived because I learned to fight for myself instead of waiting for someone else to decide my worth." She looked at each section of the coalition in turn. Damien Ashcroft was teaching me power, but he was also using me as a weapon against Kyle's empire. And if I'd understood that sooner, he might still be alive. "So you're defending the king who rejected you?" The female's voice dripped contempt. "You're going to stand there and tell us to lay down our weapons while he builds his empire on the bones of smaller packs?" "I'm not defending anyone," Celine's voice hardened. "I'm telling you that this war, this bloodbath you're creating in my name, isn't justice. It's just more violence, more death, more wolves destroying each other while calling it honor." "Then what would you have us do? Stand aside while Kyle conquers everything? Let him remake the territories in his image?" "No." Celine took a breath. I want you to let me deal with him. Not through war, not through armies fighting over whose version of power is right. Just me and him, working out what should have been resolved 5 months ago when he rejected me in that ceremonial hall. The coalition erupted in angry voices, warriors shouting over each other about justice and blood debt, and how a single Luna couldn't stand against an alpha king. But the scarred female held up a hand for silence, studying Celine with calculating eyes. You think you can make him answer for what he's done? I think I can make him understand what he threw away. Celine's voice went quiet but steady. And I think that matters more than killing him ever could. Because dead wolves can't change. They can't learn. They just become martyrs for the next generation to fight over. The female was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked past Celine to where Kael and his forces waited on the ridge. And if he refuses? If he tries to execute you for conspiracy? Then you'll have your war. Celine met her eyes. But let me try first, please. The scarred female glanced at her fellow warriors, some silent conversation passing between them. Finally, she nodded. You have 1 day. If Kael Stormborn hasn't agreed to negotiate by tomorrow's sunset, we resume the assault. And we don't stop until the Northern Empire is ash. Understood? Celine turned and walked back toward the ridge, every step feeling like walking through deep water. Her legs shook. Her breath came in shallow gasps. But she kept her spine straight and her head up, refusing to show weakness to the wolves on either side watching her retreat. She reached Kael's position and nearly collapsed. Ronan caught her before she could hit the ground, his scarred face showing something that might have been grudging respect. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, he said quietly. Both, Celine managed. Definitely both. Kael dismounted and approached, his pale eyes unreadable. You bought us 1 day. I bought us a chance to end this without more bloodshed. Celine straightened with effort. Now you need to decide if you're willing to take it. What exactly are you proposing? A negotiation. Celine's wolf pushed forward, lending her strength. You and me. We settle what should have been settled 5 months ago. Why you rejected me, what my mark actually means, and how we stop this from becoming a war that destroys both our bloodlines. Kael's jaw tightened. I don't negotiate with traitors. Then you're going to lose this war. Celine gestured at the coalition army reforming across the valley. Those wolves aren't going to stop. Damien spent years building that alliance, and now that he's dead, they're more committed than ever. You can kill every single one of them, and 3 more packs will rise up next month calling for justice. She met his eyes. Or you can talk to me and maybe find a different path. There is no different path. Kael's voice was cold. My empire is built on strength. I show weakness now, and every pack in the territories will think they can challenge me. Is that what you think this is? Weakness? Celine stepped closer, watching him stiffen. You're so terrified of looking vulnerable that you'd rather fight an endless war than admit you might have made a mistake 5 months ago. I didn't make a mistake, Kael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Liar. Celine's anger flared. You felt what the bond could have given us, and it scared you so badly you destroyed it. And now that fear is going to cost you everything you've built. The mark on Kael's shoulder flared with sudden light, responding to her words. His hand went to it unconsciously, pressing against the fabric of his shirt like he could suppress the reaction through will alone. My king, Ronan said carefully, perhaps we should consider him. Leave us, Kael said without looking away from Celine. All of you. Now. Ronan's face showed clear displeasure, but he obeyed, gesturing for the other warriors to pull back. They withdrew to a distance that was probably still within earshot, but at least gave the illusion of privacy. Kael and Celine stood alone on the ridge overlooking the battlefield, and the silence between them was thick with 5 months of unresolved devastation. Why did you really reject me? Celine asked quietly. And don't tell me it was about my training or my bloodline. Tell me the truth. Kael was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, and his voice was rawer than she'd ever heard it. Because the bond showed me my future and I was terrified of it. He turned to look at her properly. When our marks connected that first time, I saw what we could become together. Not just mates, not just Alpha and Luna. Something bigger. A partnership that would have required me to share power I'd spent my entire life consolidating. So you destroyed it. Rather than share, you chose to rule alone. I chose to protect what I'd built. Kale's pale eyes were anguished. My father was weak. He let other alphas manipulate him, let the northern territories tear themselves apart through endless politicking and compromise. When I killed him and took the crown, I swore I'd never be weak like him. I'd never let anyone have enough influence over me to make me doubt my own decisions. And you thought I'd do that, make you weak. I thought you'd become powerful enough to challenge me. Kale's voice dropped. And I couldn't allow that, so I convinced myself you were too weak to be my Luna. Told myself the rejection was about protecting my empire. But the truth was simpler and more pathetic. I was afraid of what you could become if I let the bond grow. Celine's throat closed. 5 months of believing she'd been rejected for being worthless, and the truth was the opposite. She'd been rejected for being too dangerous. Do you regret it? She asked. Every day since you left. Kale's admission came out rough and pained. My mark hasn't stopped burning. The bond is dead, but something in me knows I made a catastrophic mistake. And then I heard about you allying with Damien, heard about you training and becoming dangerous, and I realized I'd created exactly what I feared. I rejected you to keep you weak, and instead I drove you to become powerful somewhere I couldn't control it. You can't control me anywhere, Celine said. That was never what the bond was supposed to be about. The Luna mark doesn't make me your subordinate. It makes me your equal, your balance, the one who keeps your strength from becoming tyranny. I know that now. Kale's voice was barely above a whisper, but knowing it doesn't fix what I destroyed. No, it doesn't. Celine looked out at the battlefield, at the blood soaking into the valley, at the wolves waiting on both sides for this fragile piece to shatter. But maybe we can build something different. Not the bond we should have had. That's gone. But something new that doesn't require fate to force us together. What are you suggesting? An alliance. Real partnership where we're actually equals instead of just pretending. Celine met his eyes. You keep your empire. I claim my bloodline. And together we show the territories that power doesn't have to come from domination. That alphas and lunas can rule beside each other instead of one bowing to the other. The Moon Council would never accept that. Kael's voice held doubt. A Luna without a mate bond to her alpha? It violates sacred law. The Moon Council stood by while you rejected me, Celine reminded him. I don't particularly care what they accept anymore. She gestured at the coalition army. Those wolves out there? They're not fighting for sacred law or tradition. They're fighting because they're tired of being crushed by empires that don't respect anything except conquest. Show them something different, and maybe we can end this war before it consumes everything. Kael studied her for a long moment, and Celine watched the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was an alpha king who'd built his power on never showing weakness, never compromising, never letting anyone question his absolute authority. What she was proposing would require him to change the fundamental nature of how he ruled. The question was whether he was capable of that change, or whether fear would make him choose war instead. One condition, Kael finally said. If we do this, if I agree to share power with you, you help me end Damien's coalition peacefully. No more attacks, no more wolves dying over this. I can try. Celine's voice was careful, but I can't guarantee they'll listen to me. Some of them might want revenge more than they want peace. Then we convince them together. Kael extended his hand. Alpha and Luna. Partnership without the bond. Show the territories what that actually looks like. Celine looked at his offered hand and felt her wolf surge forward with a mix of hope and terror. This wasn't the future she'd imagined when the Luna mark first appeared. This wasn't the mate bond or the destiny the moon had supposedly chosen for her. This was something harder and more uncertain. Two wolves who'd destroyed each other trying to build something functional from the wreckage. But maybe that was more honest than fate had ever been. She took his hand. Deal. The moment their skin touched, both marks blazed with light so bright it was visible from the valley below. Not the mate bond rekindling. That was still dead, still severed beyond repair. But something else. The ancient magic recognizing that Alpha and Luna had chosen each other through will instead of fate, and that choice carried its own kind of power. Kael's grip tightened. We do this together. No secrets, no manipulation. If you see me becoming what my father was, you tell me. If I see you going down Damien's path, I tell you. We keep each other honest. Agreed. Celine squeezed back. And if this doesn't work, if we can't make them accept partnership over tradition, then we fight. But we fight beside each other instead of against each other. Kael's pale eyes held hers. I've spent 5 months wishing I could take back the rejection. This is as close as I'll ever get to making that right. They held the connection for another moment, then let go. Turned together to face the battlefield where hundreds of wolves waited to see if peace was possible or if war was inevitable. We're going down there, Kael said. Both of us. We tell them what we've agreed to and we give them a choice. Accept a new alliance or keep fighting until there's nothing left worth ruling over. They'll think it's a trick. Probably. Celine's lips quirked. But they thought I was weak too, and I've spent 5 months proving them wrong. Let's see if we can surprise them twice. Bam. They descended into the valley on foot, side by side, but not quite touching. Behind them, Kael's warriors followed at a distance, weapons lowered but ready. Across the valley, Damien's coalition watched with suspicion and barely restrained aggression. The scarred female who'd spoken for the coalition earlier stepped forward to meet them, flanked by her own warriors. She studied Kael with open hostility before turning her attention to Celine. You said you'd deal with him. This looks more like you've been dealt by him. We negotiated, Celine corrected. Found a solution neither of us expected, but both of us can live with. Which is? Partnership, Celine's voice carried across the valley. Kael keeps his empire, but shares power with me as an equal. No mate bond. No forced submission. Just two wolves with marks that say we're supposed to balance each other, actually trying to do that. The coalition erupted in angry voices, accusations that Celine had been manipulated or threatened, demands to know what Kael could possibly have promised her, shouts that this was exactly the kind of compromise that had gotten the territories into this mess in the first place. The scarred female held up a hand for silence again. And what does the Alpha King get from this arrangement? What stops him from using you as a figurehead while he keeps conquering everything in sight? I do, Celine said simply. I have the Ashcroft bloodline and a first pack mark that gives me influence over wolves who respect the old ways. If Kael tries to turn me into a puppet, I can make his life very difficult. She glanced at him. We keep each other honest. He restrains my ambition. I restrain his aggression. It's not perfect, but it's better than endless war. You expect us to just accept this? Another coalition warrior stepped forward, young and furious. To trust that you won't become exactly what he wants you to be? No, Celine said. I expect you to watch us. Hold us accountable. If we fail, if this partnership becomes just another empire dressed in prettier language, you come back and finish what you started today. But if we succeed, if we actually manage to build something where power is shared instead of hoarded, she looked at each warrior in turn. Then maybe we can start changing the territories. Maybe we can show other packs that there's a different way to survive than just conquering everyone around you. The coalition warriors looked at each other, uncertain and conflicted. They'd come here for revenge, for justice, for blood payment to honor Damien's memory, and instead they were being offered compromise and cooperation and the slim possibility that change could happen without more death. I want guarantees, the scarred female finally said. Written terms, clear boundaries on what power you each hold, and representatives from the coalition integrated into your court so we can see firsthand whether this partnership is real or just performance. Done, Kael said, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the valley. You'll have everything in writing, full transparency on how we govern together, and any pack in this coalition who wants a voice in my court will have one. The female studied him with narrow eyes. You realize what you're agreeing to? You're giving up absolute authority, letting wolves who wanted you dead yesterday influence your decisions. I'm acknowledging reality. Kael's voice was hard. I can keep fighting you and every other coalition that rises up to oppose me. Can keep killing wolves who think my empire is tyranny, or I can accept that maybe absolute authority isn't worth having if it means endless war. He glanced at Celine. She convinced me that there's strength in compromise. I'm choosing to believe her. The scarred female looked between them for a long moment. Then she made a gesture, and her warriors lowered their weapons. 3 months, she said. You have 3 months to prove this partnership is real, to show us that power can actually be shared instead of just changing hands. If we see backsliding, if you become just another alpha using a Luna as decoration, we resume the war. And next time, we won't stop until the Northern Empire is ashes. Fair, Celine said before Kael could respond. 3 months. We'll earn your trust or we'll lose everything trying. The scarred female nodded once, then turned and walked back to her forces. The coalition began to withdraw, still wary and heavily armed, but no longer actively threatening violence. Kael watched them go with an expression Celine couldn't quite read. I just agreed to let former enemies participate in governing my empire. You agreed to stop ruling through fear alone, Celine corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Kael looked at her. Because right now it feels like I just dismantled everything I built, and I'm not sure what I'll have left when the dust settles. You'll have something better. Or you'll have nothing. Celine's voice was gentle but firm. But at least you'll know you tried something other than conquest. They stood on the battlefield as both armies withdrew, leaving just the two of them surrounded by blood-soaked earth and the bodies of wolves who'd died before the compromise could take hold. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't even really peace yet. It was just a chance, fragile and uncertain and requiring constant work to maintain. But it was more than either of them had expected to find in the wreckage of a rejected mate bond and 5 months of separate survival. The next 3 months were brutal in ways that had nothing to do with physical combat. Kael had to face his inner circle and explain why he was sharing power with the Luna he'd publicly rejected, had to endure their arguments and concerns and barely veiled accusations that he'd gone weak. Beta Ronin was the most resistant, taking weeks to accept that this wasn't temporary insanity, but a fundamental shift in how the Northern Empire would function. Celine had to learn how to wield authority she'd never been trained for, had to sit in council meetings with alphas who still thought she was a border wolf pretending to be important, had to make decisions that affected thousands of lives, when 5 months ago she'd been a teacher's assistant with no real power over anything. They fought constantly. Celine pushed for reforms that would give smaller packs more autonomy. Kael insisted on maintaining the military strength that had kept the territories stable. They disagreed about resource allocation, about justice for past crimes, about whether the Moon Council should be dissolved or reformed. But they fought as equals. Not Alpha and Luna in the traditional sense, but two wolves with different strengths trying to balance each other instead of one dominating. The coalition watched closely. Representatives attended every major council session, taking notes and reporting back to their packs. Twice in the first month there were calls to resume the war when it looked like Kael was reverting to authoritarian habits. Both times Celine intervened, forcing him to reconsider and compromise. It was exhausting. It was frustrating. It required both of them to change in ways they'd never anticipated. But slowly, carefully, something functional started to emerge. 2 months in, Celine found Kael standing alone on the palace balcony overlooking his empire. The same balcony where he'd watched the sunrise after rejecting her, feeling nothing but certainty that he'd made the right choice. She joined him at the railing and they stood in silence for a long moment. "Do you regret it?" she finally asked. "Taking this risk? Changing everything you built?" "Every day," Kael admitted. Then he smiled slightly. "But I regret rejecting you more. At least this way I'm trying to fix what I destroyed instead of just living with the consequences. You know this might not work, right?" Celine looked at him properly. "We might fail. Might prove that partnership between Alpha and Luna without the mate bond isn't sustainable. I know. But we might succeed, and that possibility is worth more than the certainty of endless war." They stood together watching the sun set over territories that were slowly, painfully, learning that power could be shared instead of hoarded. It wasn't the destiny the moon had supposedly planned for them. The mate bond was still dead, still severed beyond any magic's ability to repair. But maybe they were building something better than destiny, something chosen instead of fated, something that required work and compromise and the constant willingness to keep trying even when it would be easier to just give up and retreat to old patterns. "Thank you," Kael said quietly, "for giving me a chance I didn't deserve." "Thank you for finally seeing what I actually am," Celine replied, "instead of what you were afraid I'd become." 3 months after the battle in the valley, the coalition leaders returned to the Northern Empire's capital for a formal assessment. The scarred female who'd led them examined every document, questioned every policy change, spoke privately with wolves from all ranks of Kael's restructured court. Finally, she stood before Kael and Celine in the throne room, the same room where the rejection had happened, now transformed into a council chamber where multiple voices could be heard. "You've done more than I expected," the female said bluntly. "Power is actually shared. Decisions are actually debated. Wolves who would have been executed 6 months ago now have voices in governance." She paused. "It's still not perfect. There are still too many policies that favor the Northern Empire's interests over smaller packs. But it's progress. Real measurable progress. Does that mean the coalition stands down?" Celine asked carefully. "It means we're willing to keep watching." The female's eyes moved between them. "You've bought yourselves more time. Use it wisely. Because the moment this partnership becomes performance instead of reality, we'll know." She left with her delegation, and Celine felt something in her chest finally relax. They'd survived the trial period, proven that partnership could function. It wasn't a complete victory. There would be more challenges, more tests, more wolves questioning whether this new arrangement could really last. But they'd made it through the hardest part. They'd taken a rejected mate bond and the wreckage of two incompatible ambitions and forged them into something that actually served the wolves they governed. 6 months after the battlefield compromise, Thera returned. Celine was in the training yards working through combat forms when the massive female appeared at the edge of the compound. She looked the same, powerful and ancient and slightly amused by the chaos younger wolves created for themselves. Celine's breath caught. She walked over slowly, suddenly uncertain how to bridge the distance that had grown between them. "I heard you changed the world," Thera said without preamble. "Thought I'd come see if the rumors were exaggerated." "They probably are." Celine managed a smile. "I just helped stop a war and completely restructured how the Northern Empire governs." "Nothing major." Thera's amber eyes studied her with that intense focus Celine remembered from months of brutal training. "You've grown. I had a good teacher." Celine's throat closed. "I'm sorry for how we left things. You were right about Damien. I should have listened. You were learning." Thera's voice was gentle. "And sometimes we have to make our own mistakes to understand why the warnings mattered." She glanced toward the palace. "The Alpha King treating you well? As well as two wolves who destroyed each other and are trying to build something functional can manage." Celine followed her gaze. "It's not the mate bond the moon chose. But it's honest. And maybe that's better." "Maybe." Thera looked back at her. "I'm proud of you, child. You survived everything they threw at you and came out stronger instead of broken." The words hit harder than expected. Celine had spent 6 months proving herself to councils and coalitions and skeptical alphas. But hearing approval from the wolf who'd first believed in her potential meant more than all of that. "Stay," Celine said impulsively. "Help me keep building this. We could use someone with your experience." Thera smiled. "I'm a rogue, Celine. I don't belong in palaces or power structures. But I'll be around, watching, making sure you don't forget the lessons I beat into you." She left before Celine could argue further, disappearing into the wild lands that had always been her true territory. But Celine felt lighter for having seen her. Felt like she'd come full circle from the broken girl who'd stumbled into those ruins 5 months ago. That night, Kael found her on the balcony again. "Your mentor returned," he said, settling beside her. "For about 20 minutes. Celine smiled. "Long enough to tell me I've grown and then disappear again." "She taught you well." Kael's voice held grudging respect. "The wolf you've become is nothing like the girl I rejected." "No. That girl died the night you severed the bond." Celine looked at him. "What's left is something I built myself. With help, with training, with mistakes and compromises and learning how to be powerful without being cruel. And with me," Kael said quietly. "Like it or not, we built this together." "True." Celine considered that. "We're probably both worse for it. Or better." Kael's lips quirked. Hard to tell which yet. They stood together in comfortable silence, and Celine thought about how strange her life had become. 6 months ago, she'd been in chains, convinced she was going to be executed. Now she was co-ruling an empire with the male who'd destroyed her, and somehow they were making it work through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. The Luna mark on her shoulder had stopped burning weeks ago. Now it just hummed with steady power, a constant reminder of what she carried and what she'd chosen to do with it. The mate bond was still dead. Some things couldn't be repaired once broken. But the marks themselves had found a new kind of connection. Not fate, just choice. Two wolves deciding every day to keep trying instead of retreating to easier but lonelier paths. What do you think happens next? Celine asked. After we've proven this partnership can last? We keep building. Kael's voice was thoughtful. We show other territories that power doesn't have to mean conquest. We train the next generation to value cooperation over domination. He glanced at her. We write a new kind of story for our kind. One where rejected bonds don't mean failure, where broken things can be remade into something functional, if not beautiful. Sounds exhausting. It will be. Kael's smile was genuine for once. But at least we won't be bored. Celine laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. 6 months ago, she would have said she'd never laugh with Kael Stormborn, that the hurt he'd caused was too deep to ever heal fully. But time and shared struggle had sanded down the sharpest edges of that pain, left something more complex in its place. Not forgiveness exactly, not love in the traditional mate bond sense, just partnership, respect, the willingness to keep showing up even when it was difficult. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was better than the destiny fate had tried to force on them. 1 year after the rejection, the Northern Empire held a ceremony to formalize the new governance structure. Representatives from every pack in the territories attended, some supportive, some skeptical, all curious to see if the partnership between rejected mates would last or crumble under scrutiny. Celine stood in the same ceremonial hall where Kael had destroyed her, but this time she wore formal leathers instead of a white gown. This time she walked down that aisle with her head high and her Luna mark blazing with pride instead of shame. And this time when she reached the platform, Kael extended his hand to help her up like an equal instead of dismissing her like a mistake. They turned to face the gathered wolves together. Elder Thorn stepped forward, looking ancient and tired but somehow satisfied. A year ago I stood in this hall and witnessed a rejection that violated sacred traditions. Today I stand here to witness something unprecedented. An Alpha and Luna choosing partnership without the mate bond that should unite them. He raised his hands, and the ceremonial symbols of Alpha and Luna power were brought forward. Not crowns or chains or any of the traditional markers of bonded pairs. Instead, twin circlets of silver worked with runes from the first pack era. Symbols of equal authority chosen through will instead of fate. Thorn placed the first circlet on Kael's head. Alpha King Kael Stormborn. Do you swear to rule with strength tempered by wisdom, to share power instead of hoarding it, to let your Luna check your worst impulses and trust her judgment when it conflicts with your own? I swear, Kael said, and his voice carried weight that made the hall go silent. Thorn turned to Celine and placed the second circlet on her head. Luna Celine Ashford, do you swear to lead with compassion tempered by strength, to claim your power without apology? To keep your alpha honest when ambition threatens to become tyranny? I swear. Celine's voice held that ancient influence, the mark's power broadcasting to every wolf present. Then by the authority vested in me by the Moon Council and the assembled packs, I declare this partnership recognized and binding, not through fate or bond, but through choice and commitment. May your alliance serve the territories better than tradition ever could. The hall erupted in voices, some cheering, some murmuring disapproval, all of them witnessing something that had never happened before in wolf history. An Alpha and Luna ruling as equals without the mate bond to unite them. Two wolves who'd destroyed each other finding a way to build something functional from the wreckage. Celine looked at Kael and saw her own uncertainty reflected in his pale eyes. They'd just committed to something unprecedented, had formalized a partnership that went against centuries of tradition and sacred law. And they had no idea if it would last a year or a decade, or if it would crumble the moment real pressure hit. But they'd try. They'd keep trying, because the alternative was going back to the old ways where rejection meant permanent devastation and power meant lonely domination. After the ceremony, Celine stood on the balcony and looked out at the territories spreading before her. Somewhere to the north, Thera was watching and probably smiling with satisfaction. Somewhere in the wildlands, Iris had returned to her pack and was telling the story of the Luna who'd saved her life. Somewhere in the eastern mountains, Damien's compound stood empty but not forgotten, a reminder of what happened when ambition became manipulation. And here in the Northern Empire's capital, Celine Ashford stood as Luna. Not because fate demanded it, but because she'd survived everything thrown at her and come out strong enough to claim the title on her own terms. Kyle joined her at the railing. Regrets? Hundreds, Celine admitted, but not about this, not about us trying. Good, because I have hundreds too. Kale's voice was quiet. But you're not one of them anymore. They stood together as the sun set over territories that were slowly, painfully, learning that power could be shared and bonds could be rebuilt even after being shattered. It wasn't the story either of them had expected to live, but it was theirs, chosen instead of fated, earned instead of given. And maybe that made it more valuable than destiny ever could have been. Celine reached for Kyle's hand, and he took it without hesitation. The marks on their shoulders blazed with synchronized light. Not the mate bond that was still dead and gone, but something new they were building together. Partnership, alliance. Two wolves who'd learned the hard way that real strength came from choosing to keep trying, even when it would be easier to walk away. The rejected Luna and the Alpha King who'd destroyed her. Building an empire not on conquest or tradition, but on the radical idea that power was worth more when shared. It wasn't perfect. It would never be easy. But it was real. And that was enough.